Lately, I've been covering a lot of great wrestling shows and great wrestling matches on this channel. From the 1997 stuff on Reliving the War to the hand-picked matches such as Shawn Michaels vs The Undertaker and all the highlights from the new generation. Here's the thing though, sometimes with pro wrestling you just want to watch something truly awful just for laughs. It helps us appreciate the good times better, and it makes us question what on earth a promotion was thinking when they booked a terrible match, a terrible promo, or they introduced something that just completely falls flat on its face. The bad times in wrestling gets just as much attention as the good times, and rightfully so. There's nothing like watching a good old train wreck sometimes, and hey, we should never take pro wrestling seriously anyway. You can't let stuff that happened 20 odd years ago get you angry. It's funny to look back on. With all the great wrestling I've had the privilege of watching over these past few months, I thought it was time to get my hands dirty and watch something bad. And when we think about bad wrestling shows, WCW Thunder springs to mind instantly. I already talked about how the show was created and how Thunder was more of a headache than an actual opportunity, and as time went on, Thunder would become more and more of an afterthought. Eventually, WCW would hold 2 episodes of Thunder on one night. The first episode was live, the second was taped for the following week. This sounds straightforward enough, but when you have live nitros going on every week too, you gotta be careful about what you put on that taped Thunder show. Everything gets booked in advance, and an injury or a short notice change of direction could make Thunder nonsensical. So this leads to the taped episodes always being uneventful and pretty boring. Kevin Nash talked about this in a shoot interview. He explained how booking 4 live Nitros, 2 live Thunders, and 2 taped Thunders during one creative meeting would cause massive problems, considering the guys who had limited dates, guys who said, "That doesn't work for me, brother," guys who got injured, planned title changes, storylines evolving, things of that nature. Planning ahead wasn't a WCW strong point, so the easiest thing to do was to throw together Thunder episodes that didn't mean anything on the grand scheme of things. Still, every now and then they'd try to do something to make the shows worth watching, but most of the time, especially in 2000, the show sucked balls. I reached out to you guys to get some inspiration for the hell I'm about to put myself through today. I wanted to find the worst episodes of Thunder, or at least some that are comically bad. I got some suggestions from viewers. David Arquette winning the world title came up a few times. Someone suggested the final episode of Thunder as being one of the worst. OSW Review covered the October 15th, 1998 Thunder, and people felt that it couldn't get much worse than that. Maybe because it was a gentle reminder of how Thunder was usually a big old load of nothing. As the day went on, more and more suggestions came rolling in, and I thought, hey, this could actually be a series. There's so much crap on WCW Thunder that this is something I could come back to a few times, a dead horse that I could flog over and over again. And then I thought, hey, why just limit this to Thunder? Why not expand this to cover all of the absolute nonsense we witnessed in WCW, especially during the later days? I made a first cut of this video that went on Patreon where I said this will be a Thunder only show named Thunder Blunder. I also announced this on Twitter, but I'm gonna change that. I've dropped Thunder from the name. So welcome to WCW Blunder, a mini-series covering all sorts of WCW bullshittery. Yeah, I'm keeping that Blunder name because I like it. WCW Blunder. Now, to be clear, sometimes I'll cover full WCW TV episodes and sometimes I'll just cover moments, matches and promos, if there's enough to talk about. I'm already doing the full episode thing on Reliving the War, so I'll use Blunder to change things up a little and give myself a little more free rein. Although, for episode 1, we are going to check out a whole Thunder episode, because this one had a running theme that was truly something else. This is some prime WCW bullshit you're going to see here today, folks. Also, this won't be weekly. I'm not going to put pressure on myself to get one of these out on a schedule, but I do want to build up a little library of WCW nonsense, because there is quite a lot to look at. So, the idea started as a WCW Thunder exclusive show, but I've opened up the doors for all sorts of WCW shenanigans. Everything's welcome on WCW Blunder. The 3rd of May 2000 episode of Thunder is what we'll be looking at today, where every match is contested under New York rules. Was this episode held in New York? Fuck no, it was held in Memphis, but never mind that. What exactly is a New York match? Well, every match on the show does not have a referee, but matches can only end via pinfall or submission. So who counts the pinfalls and who checks for submissions? Well, the wrestlers do. Yeah, let that sink in for a moment. You pin your opponent and you count to 3. Easy payday, brother. Fast count that shit and run out of the building. This all happened during the Millionaires Club vs New Blood rivalry, so it's straight out of the Vince Russo playbook, although Eric Bischoff was also lending a hand in the creative department too. And really, what we end up with is a perfect example of way too much chaos creating a messy, incoherent parody of a wrestling show. Now, you might think this actually could be fun and you might bring up the old, well, at least it's something different argument. I'm guilty of doing that too when I try to see the good in things, but the show feels so out of control, so thrown together, and so ridiculous that it almost becomes a joke. But let's see how this taped episode of Thunder all came together. We're 4 days away from Slamboree 2000, the one with the triple cage WCW World Title match featuring David Arquette, Jeff Jarrett and Diamond Dallas Page, and also the one with possibly the worst pay-per-view poster in the history of pay-per-view posters. Our commentary team of Tony Schiavone, Mike Tenay and Bobby Heenan hype up the Slamboree main event before letting us know that the Millionaires Club and a few allies are waiting outside for the New Blood to arrive. We see a limo pull up to the arena, the Millionaires Club and their mates run out, and they jump Vince Russo, Eric Bischoff and a few other New Blood guys who were in the limo, including Buff Bagwell and Shane Douglas. We come back from a commercial break and Russo's absolutely livid that the New Blood guys who were already in the arena didn't bother to help, so he rounds up the troops and the whole faction goes to the ring to cut a promo. Miss Elizabeth is being held by the New Blood against her will, by the way. We won't get into why, but just keep it in mind. Russo calls out the Millionaires Club and their friends, and Russo says the New Blood is going to war tonight due to the unprovoked attack at the top of the show. Vince is going to put everyone's name in his boot and draw names to face the New Blood. Why a boot and not a hat? I don't know. I'm sure someone had a fucking hat. And Russo says the matches are going to be contested under New York rules. No holds barred, no referee, the wrestlers count the pinfalls. Every match on Thunder will be contested in this fashion, by the way. Well, all except the main event, but that too is a giant clusterfuck anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Ric Flair has some choice words for Vince Russo.
Take a look at who you're talking to, dipshit!
Flair says the elite are standing at the entranceway and there's no way the New Blood can beat this collection of superstars, so the challenge gets accepted. The babyfaces then storm the ring and we have another brawl. The New Blood get out of harm's way and yeah, it's messy. You can see Dallas Page getting frustrated with the amount of people bumping into him. Russo runs away, the babyfaces are left in the ring with security, and 15 minutes have passed on Thunder, including commercial time, and there hasn't been a match yet. Fortunately, a match happens next. It's Double J versus Kanyon. Jarrett says he handpicked Kanyon to fight tonight on Thunder, so one match in and that whole thing about pulling names from Russo's boot has already been thrown down the toilet. And yes, I know he's the chosen one, but it still takes away from the whole theme of random guys facing the New Blood. Kimberly then takes time to cut a promo on DDP, and when I say she takes the time, I mean she takes the time. She talks longer than what Jarrett did, and if you combine Kimberly and Jarrett's promos, it's actually longer than the Jarrett vs Kanyon match. The match is a whole 3 minutes and 20 seconds. Basically, Kimberly says everything Page achieved in WCW was thanks to Eric Bischoff, and everything he's achieved as a man is because of Kimberly. She calls the fans lame marks. She says Page needs to hurry up with the divorce papers. It all gets zero reaction. Kanyon comes out and the two fight outside the ring. We get bumps at the guardrails, bumps at the ring steps. They get inside the ropes where they do some more work before once again going back to the outside. There's more fighting by the guardrails, Jarrett uses a steel chair, and then it dawns on you that every match on this show is probably going to play out in the exact same fashion. I mean, what else can they do except maybe use different weapons? Kimberly tries to get involved, but DDP comes out and he takes away Double J's guitar from his wife. He then gives her a hug, and then he smashes the guitar over her head. That's his wife, guys. Fucking hell. Page then wins the match for Kanyon when he hits a diamond cutter on Double J, and Kanyon counts his own pin. Gonna be honest, this isn't too bad because it's the first New York Rules match that you'll see on the show, but there's no way this novelty won't wear off by the end of Thunder. So that's 1 point for the Millionaires Club, 0 for the New Blood. Russo is naturally pissed off backstage, but he's going to send the Wall out to destroy Lex Luger. Now, it isn't made clear, but this is a tables match that also doesn't have a referee. Obviously, you win by putting your opponent through a table, so you won't need to count your own pin. What's the point? Why is there no referee? Don't even think about sitting down to watch this tables match here because there's so many distractions. First, Russo comes down to the ring with Liz. This was all done to distract Luger. Russo goes on commentary, and then Ric Flair comes down. He too joins the commentary desk just to make sure Russo doesn't screw Lex over. The competitors in the ring play nice, they don't use any weapons, they aren't really fighting dirty, there's no issues. On the outside, Russo hits Flair with a bat, he passes the bat to the Wall, but the Wall drops it when Luger gets him up for the torture rack. Russo ends up using the bat instead, Vince whacks Luger, Luger falls back, but it's the Wall who goes through the table and the total package wins. Russo then challenges Flair to get in the ring. Flair jumps in, and Russo then uses Liz as a shield. Liz kicks Russo in the balls, Buff Bagwell and Shane Douglas then come out to attack Flair, and then Chronic come out to attack the franchise and Bagwell. We aren't done yet, by the way. Billy Kidman then shows up, and what do you know, he stuck his hand in Vince Russo's boot, and he drew out Ric Flair's name. So we now go straight to a Ric Flair versus Billy Kidman match on Thunder. I need to take a break already. So, Nature Boy Ric Flair. You kinda associate Slick Rick with the traditions of the NWA in the early days of World Championship Wrestling. Here he is, wrestling a Vince Russo New York match on Thunder against Billy Kidman. Nothing against Kidman, by the way, excellent talent and a standout during these dark days of WCW. But Flair versus Kidman on Thunder in this kind of match in the year 2000, it just doesn't feel right, does it? To his credit, Flair bumps around quite a lot for Kidman and everything Kidman does is on point, but neither man takes advantage of the no DQ rule. This is a standard one-on-one match with no referee, and what's more, there's no pin attempts at all. It ends with Conan and Rey Mysterio hitting the ring to attack Flair. Big sexy Kevin Nash then shows up to help Flair, and Conan takes a jackknife. Kidman goes to leave the arena, but Hulk Hogan then shows up and he brings Kidman back down to the ring. Kidman gets dragged out to safety by Conan and Mysterio. Mike Awesome's music then plays, and for whatever reason, he hits the ring when 3 enemies are just waiting to attack him. Well, 2, seeing as Flair's having a break in the corner. Awesome takes a jackknife. Kevin Nash then says, the winner of this match due to outside interference is Mike Awesome. And I'm not even going to try to make sense of this statement. I don't know what's going on. I assume Kidman versus Flair is a no contest. So much for your New York rules matches. Absolute dog shit. Someone out there is going to defend this, I know. There's always people in the comments just waiting to defend the honour of shit wrestling. But this show already has me drained out, and I'm the guy who watches Raw and Nitro every week, plus pay-per-views for YouTube videos. We're only at the 35-minute mark of this episode of Thunder, and already I want to top out. Diamond Dallas Page versus Vampiro's up next. Another New York match. It sounds interesting enough on paper, but don't get your hopes up, because Sting attacks Vampiro during the entrances. We even see Sting getting himself in position for the surprise attack, using a black sheet to remain undetected. Fucking hell. Sting grabs a conveniently placed bucket of red liquid, and Vampiro takes a red liquid bath. Yep, that's what it is, it's only red liquid. Vampiro gets thrown in the ring, Dallas hits the cutter right away, and it's over. The only good thing to come out of this match is this shot right here. What a glorious waste of TV time. The babyfaces now have 3 victories, while the New Blood have 1. Russo's again shown backstage, and he's calling his team a bunch of losers. I mean, listen to this guy scream. Shut up! Shut up! Shut up! The babyfaces, meanwhile, they're having a great old time. So, you're Vince Russo in this predicament, your boys are getting completely wrecked and you've lost 3 out of 4 matches. You're going to send out one of your biggest, baddest dudes and you're going to manipulate the draw so you can claim an easy victory, right? I mean, you're fucking squealing backstage like a child about your team sucking balls. So what do? Well, Russo decides to send Mike Awesome to the ring. The same Mike Awesome who just got destroyed by Kevin Nash under 10 minutes ago. And Mike Awesome announces that he drew Sting's name out of Russo's big smelly boot. Great work, lads, great work. Sting wrecks Awesome during the opening moments of the match. Mike goes to the outside and he gets attacked by the Misfits in action. These guys were shit-canned on the previous episode of Nitro. The Misfits throw Awesome back in the ring. Sting hits 2 Stinger splashes. He applies the Scorpion Deathlock and Awesome taps out. It's a small nitpick here, but Russo didn't mention anything about submissions when talking about how a New York rules match plays out, but we'll ignore that. 2 minutes and 15 seconds, almost a whole 1.5 minutes longer than the DDP vs Vampiro match. These New Blood losers better get it together because Russo's plan has been absolutely shit so far. This is a job for Scotty Steiner. Big Papa Pump tells Russo not to touch him. He'll go out and have a match, but he isn't doing it for Vince, he's doing it for himself. Steiner comes out and he tells Hulk Hogan to get his ass in the ring. So much for drawing names. Old Mike Awesome got the short end of the stick, didn't he? Steiner says he and his freaks will visit Hogan's house after the match, and Big Linda's gonna call Scott the big bad booty daddy. This was one of the best things about this entire episode of Thunder. Out comes Hulk Hogan and Steiner doesn't get in a single piece of offense to start this one off. Absolutely nothing. The fight goes to the crowd where Hugh Morris shows up, and it becomes a 2-on-1 match. 2 babyfaces versus 1 heel, mind you. Scott does manage to hit a double low blow followed by a double clothesline. He calls for anyone from the New Blood to come out and help him, but no one shows up. When Hulk and Morris fight back and when it's made clear that Scott isn't winning, Big Papa Pump decides to just leave the ring. And that's how this match ends. I don't even know what I'm watching anymore, and why can't the New Blood win any matches? Why is this so one-sided? Another limo pulls up outside the arena. FUNB can be seen on the front plate. We'll see who gets out of the vehicle later on. Tag Team Champion Shane Douglas and Buff Bagwell take on Chronic next. Another New York match. And well, this one is actually mildly entertaining, and honestly, this is where a New York rules match could actually work, because you don't need to tag your opponent in, and your teammate has to perform the 3 count. This isn't a bad idea at all for a tag team match type, and if done with the right teams, it could be interesting. They don't do a terrible job here on Thunder either, but there isn't enough near falls. Chronic win the match, but they don't win the tag team titles, even though they take the belts after the match. Okay, Russo's plan completely backfired, almost to the point where the New Blood feel like sympathetic babyfaces. There's still 30 minutes left on this episode of Thunder, and WCW decide to just completely top out and put everyone in the ring for a battle royal. It's kinda like when you create a pay-per-view in a wrestling video game and you run out of ideas, so you just say, fuck it, battle royal, that'll pop a rating for sure. Before we go to the ring, a bus pulls up behind the limousine. Eric did talk about bringing in backup, so who's in the limo and who's in the bus? We'll find out in a moment. Eric Bischoff challenges the Millionaires Club and their buddies to step in the ring for a big old hardcore fight, and Ric Flair says that'll only happen if it's a battle royal with the winner getting a world title shot. Bischoff and Russo agree, so we have ourselves a hardcore battle royal, and look at this, just look. Bischoff said before the bout it was 11 New Blood versus 11 babyfaces, but 41 guys end up getting involved in this match, and what's more, it takes ages for guys to start getting eliminated, so you're watching guys trying to find space while throwing punches. And yeah, this is generally what happens in all battle royals, but they drag this out for so long that it makes you wonder, why did they rush through the earlier matches? In the middle of the battle royal, the Mamalukes and the Harris brothers join the fight. Harlem Heat's music then plays, and then you remember that this is WCW in 2000. It's Stevie Ray and Ahmed Johnson, not Stevie Ray and Booker T. Cash is also here, and so's Norman Smiley. He must have become an honorary member of Harlem Heat Incorporated for this episode of Thunder. And just look at the state of this now, Jesus Christ. Tank Abbott then comes down, people start getting eliminated, but it's not happening quick enough. There's still no room for guys to do anything at all. Medusa, Asia and Mona get involved. Hacksaw Jim Duggan runs down to do some damage. And then the guy from the limousine steps out and he begins heading to the ring. And It's the Macho Man Randy Savage. I know, right? How dare I shit on an episode of Thunder that has the return of Randy Savage? Well, don't you think there'd be a much better way to use Savage than have him get involved in this absolute mess of a match? And this is also Randy's final WCW appearance. What a way to go out in the clusterfuck battle royal. He hits 9 double axe handles. And then he exits the ring via the middle rope to fight on the outside. And that's the Macho Man's involvement completely done with. He doesn't get back inside the ropes until after the match. Bret Hart then shows up and he clocks Hogan on the back with a chair. Hulk rolls under the bottom rope and he too doesn't get back in the ring. I then started questioning if this battle royal wasn't actually over the top rope, but it was. Savage and Hogan were the only guys who didn't go over the top. It comes down to Flair and Shane Douglas. Vince Russo runs down to hit Flair with a bat, but he ends up hitting the franchise. The cameras completely miss this. Flair chases Russo out of the ring, he hits Douglas, and Flair wins the Battle Royal and he wins a title shot. Another loss for the New Blood. On the outside of the ring, Bischoff hits Hogan with a bat, but this too is missed by the cameras. What's going on? For whatever reason, Kidman covers Hogan and Bischoff counts to 3. I'm not even gonna question it anymore. DDP and Jeff Jarrett fight on the entranceway scaffold. David Arquette is supposed to come out and hit Jarrett with the guitar, but he fucking falls through the gimmick stage floor. You couldn't make this up. The commentators pretend he was never there and the cameras quickly cut over to Randy Savage helping Hulk Hogan. Clearly the show was supposed to end with the big bump off the scaffold, but since Arquette fell through the fucking floor, they just cut to Jeff Jarrett standing on the stage, and then the show fades to black.
And DDP and Jarrett continue their battle!
So the show did have Randy Savage, Bret Hart, and Scott Steiner saying Linda Hogan's gonna call him the big bad booty daddy. I'll give it that much, but my god, what a train wreck. I feel annoyed that I watched this show. I feel tired after watching this show. I've wasted time scripting this upload, gathering clips, double checking that Arquette actually fell through the floor. I wanted to watch some absolutely awful wrestling and I definitely got what I asked for. So that was the first episode of WCW Blunder. I hope you enjoyed it. I've got a list of episodes, matches and promos I'm going to cover, but if there's anything you want covered in this little mini-series, then please let me know. This isn't going to run long, it's just a side project that I think could be fun, and there'll maybe only be 2 episodes a month, maybe less, maybe I'm feeling particularly awful about myself and I'll do 3, but let me know what WCW blunders that you want to see, and remember guys, please check the channel because I may have covered your request already. Thanks for watching episode 1, avoid this episode of Thunder at all costs, and take care. Oh god. Welcome back to WCW Blunder, the series where we take a look at some of the mishaps, mistakes, and general nonsense that graced our television screens when WCW was in business. As mentioned in episode 1, this was going to be a WCW Thunder exclusive show, but I wanted to include all of WCW programming in this series because I may have been limiting the potential of the series by just having Thunder matches and moments. So today, we're going to look at 2 shows that didn't even take place on the Turner Network. You've probably heard of these before, but if not, you're going to be seriously confused. WCW Snow Brawl and WCW Beach Brawl were shows that aired on MTV. The channel would have theme blocks of programming during spring, known as Spring Break, and another in winter, known as MTV Snowed In. During these blocks, MTV would alter their usual shows to fit in with the theme. So, for example, there was a Snowed In version of Total Request Live, but MTV also put on other shows to fit the programming theme, and you guessed it, they partnered up with World Championship Wrestling to put on a few events. Both events, if you can even call them events, happened in 1999 with Snow Brawl airing on the 6th of February and Beach Brawl airing on the 12th of March. Now, this all sounds absolutely fine, right? It's exposure for WCW on a different channel, and it's even more pro wrestling for us to sit and enjoy. Well, no, these shows were the absolute shits. I'll say this before getting started though, one thing I do like about these shows are the venues themselves. I do like when wrestling rings get taken out of arenas and put in unique locations, so that part is good. The rest, terrible, absolutely terrible. Let's get started and we'll take a look at these two abysmal shows. Before that though, I covered the other MTV WCW show quite a while back, the Ultimate Video Bash, so you can watch that when you get done here. Snow Brawl takes place in the Snow Summit Mountain Resort in Big Bear Lake, California. The 20-minute broadcast opens up with 3 Nitro girls dancing in the ring to The Offspring's Pretty Fly for a White Guy. That's maybe another positive from these shows, the fact that actual released music could get played and not music from the Turner audio library. Whether you care much for The Offspring or any other music you hear in the show is another question. Only 3 Nitro girls though. I think that's Spice, Shay and Whisper. Don't quote me on that though, I need to brush up on my Nitro girls knowledge. We go to our commentary team of Larry Zbyszko, Jimmy Hart and Rob Zombie. Jimmy Hart puts Rob over as a legend of heavy metal. He's holding a snowflake trophy. Yeah, a snowflake trophy. And he says we're going to see a 7-man battle royal tonight. I guess the winner becomes King Snowflake. Why 7 guys? Couldn't they get at least another 3 people in to make it a 10-man battle royal? Larry Zbyszko, who doesn't look too thrilled to be at Snow Brawl, explains the rules of a battle royal, probably for those who have no idea what wrestling is, or those who have no fucking idea why this is on their TV screens. And Rob Zombie is actually okay here, he doesn't ham it up, and he gets the job done.
It's got to be the most violent, brutal display of carnage and carnality to happen all weekend at Snowed In. So Jimmy, take it away.
Well, first of all,
we go to Stuttering John from the Howard Stern Show. John's our ring announcer, and boy does he have some shit jokes for us today. Here's a few of his ring announcements.
Wrestler stands 6 foot 2 inches, weighs 250 pounds, and would love to kick Marilyn Manson's ass. He has Sandra Bullock's home phone number and refuses to use it. On his way to the ring now is a man that would love to get his hands on those little Hanson kids.
Eventually, he just gives up and the jokes stop by the time the last entrant comes to the ring. The first guy to enter this battle royal is Conan. He comes to the ring, he cuts his promo.
But more important than all that, Big Bird's body then.
And out next we have Kenny Chaos. Something tells me we aren't going to see Goldberg, Sting and Hollywood Hogan at this show. Disco Inferno comes out next. Jimmy Hart says Disco is now in the NWO as the luggage carrier for Scott Hall and Kevin Nash. Don't hold back there, Jimmy. Cruiserweight champion Billy Kidman is going to take part in this mess. Brian Adams, representing NWO Black and White, he comes out and he cuts a promo. Brian Adams cutting a promo.
When you announce a member of the New World Order, show a little more passion, okay? Or I'll cure your stuttering problem by slapping the taste out of your mouth.
Adams says he's very impressed with the resort. He's never seen so many geeks, punks and weenies in one place at the same time. He says he'll be practicing his clotheslines later on the snowboarding and skiing gigs at the bottom of the hill. The NWO went all out for this one, didn't they? The White and Black sent Brian Adams and the Elite sent Disco Inferno. Wrath is our next entrant. Rob Zombie has said a few times that Stuttering John looks nervous in the ring, but I think the guy just doesn't want to be there. The final entrant is Booker T, and that's your 7 guys: Conan, Kenny Chaos, Disco, Kidman, Adams, Wrath, and Booker. It isn't a list of nobodies, but it isn't a list of main event talent at that time either. It gives the impression that WCW didn't care about this show, or the big dogs on the big contracts simply turned it down, or they just weren't asked to go. With that in mind, we all know who would have been perfect for this. Glacier. Not only would old Frosty Balls be right at home in these cold temperatures, but he also fit the bill as a mid-card guy. Hell, he was lower mid-card at this point. Glacier could have won this thing and revitalized his career with his Snowflake trophy, but someone clearly didn't think ahead. Could have been the greatest thing that Glacier ever achieved. We're about to go to commercial break. We see the Nitro girls dancing before we cut away. We come back, and the first thing we see is some dude wiping out on the slopes. Let that be a sign of things to come. And the Nitro Girls are still dancing, this time to the Backstreet Boys. What's a bit concerning is that this thing is already at the halfway point and we're yet to see any grapples, but as much as we'll rip these shows apart, they really aren't wrestling shows, although they were promoted as such. Honestly, I don't even know what these should be classed as. I'd probably file them under the giant waste of fucking time category. After the dance, Whisper gives Rob Zombie a bite to eat.
Oh, thank you. I have some food.
Rob, never trust a woman.
Fucking hell, Jimmy. And the match gets underway not by ringing a bell, but with Rob Zombie killing a pigeon. So here we go, a match with what Jimmy Hart called some of the biggest stars in WCW, while the Deftones' My Own Summer plays in the background. I like how the wrestlers kinda delay at the beginning, as if to say, oh, we're supposed to have a match now, aren't we? You can tell the usual WCW production team didn't work on this, the camera work isn't what we're used to, and the camera cuts are also a bit messy. And if you think this is bad looking, wait until you see Beach Brawl. It's all strike moves to start us off, punches, kicks, chops, nothing much in the way of actual wrestling. The guys team up on Disco Inferno for a bit, and when Raph decides to perform the meltdown, you know, a wrestling move, the rest of the guys are like, oh no wrestling moves in this one, lad, out you go. Raph ends up being the first guy eliminated. Kidman kicks the shit out of Disco in the corner, and Conan ends up hitting Disco with the face jam, or X Factor, or K Factor, whatever. First wrestling move of the match though. Conan then eliminates Kenny Chaos, Kidman hits a Hurricane Rana on Adams, and Conan continues to stand out by hitting his rolling clothesline. Unfortunately for K-Dog though, he gets eliminated next when NWO guys Brian Adams and Disco Inferno team up. We come back from a commercial break and Billy Kidman gets eliminated by Booker T's spinning heel kick. Disco and Adams then team up and they go after Booker. Booker manages to hit a double clothesline, but it's not enough. Disco and Adams throw Booker over the top rope, so it all comes down to two NWO guys. The illustrious, historic WCW Snow Brawl Battle Royal ends when Disco can't stop himself from dancing, so Adams lifts him up and Disco gets thrown into the snow. I was about to say that this is the only thing of relevance Brian ever won in WCW while he was in the NWO, but this thing was far from relevant. I was also going to say that WCW pissed away an opportunity here to showcase their brand of pro wrestling to a wider audience, or at least an audience who would never dream of watching pro wrestling, but I honestly don't think they gave a shit. As Disco gets whacked with snowballs, Jimmy Hart and Rob Zombie get in the ring to present Adams with his Snowflake Award. Adams calls the fans little people, and he thanks himself for looking so good. And then, oh, who's this? A surprise at WCW Snow Brawl? Who could it? Oh, it's Conan. Fuck's sake.
NWO, you can bow down, toss my salad, and peel my potatoes.
The Beastie Boys body moving plays, Conan lifts the Snowflake trophy, and that's it over. It looked like a terrible amount of effort with getting the ring set up and whatnot for very little payoff. I'm sure regular viewers of MTV didn't care, WCW fans didn't care. I don't think the guys involved cared, but hopefully they got a night at the ski resort at least. Positives to take away would be the location and how the show looks. WCW were always better than the WWF when it came to unique venues, so I'll give it that. Rob Zombie was also pretty decent on commentary, and I've got nothing else. Watch it for how unique it is as a wrestling broadcast, but don't watch it for anything else. So a few months later and we have the WCW MTV Beach Brawl. No lessons were learned. This one is even further away from being an actual wrestling show. Cancun, Mexico is our location, and once again, it looks unique and it looks different, so points for that. The show starts again with 3 Nitro Girls dancing in the ring, and our commentary team this time consists of Jimmy Hart, Raven, and Kid Rock.
Wrestling freaks of America, welcome to MTV's Beach Brawl. I'm Kid Rock with the legendary Jimmy Hart and my main man Raven from World Championship Wrestling.
Whereas Rob Zombie kept it simple, Kid Rock is, well, he's being Kid Rock. He briefly tells us how a battle royal works.
Their mission is to be the last mean mother left standing, and when the music stops. Last one when the music stops. Got that?
So, last man standing when the music stops? What if there's 2 people left standing when the music stops? Ignore this anyway, it's just another battle royal. Only this time there's 6 guys who agreed to do this thing and not 7. Kid Cox says there's a slamming band who's going to give us a beat while the wrestlers take a beating. Very good. And that slamming band is Fear Factory. Jimmy Hart then shows us the coveted, much sought after Beach Brawl trophy, and he says only the meanest, baddest guy will leave Beach Blast with this in their hands. Raven then talks about Battle Royal matches.
The last man standing is the winner. You got to toss everybody out. It's the last man standing, like that Bruce Willis movie. Of course, that thing didn't do any box office, but that thing sunk faster than the Titanic. I don't even want to get into that.
Yeah, Raven's loaded at spring break. Kid Rock then compares pro wrestling to pimping.
Like, wrestling's a game of quickness, agility, all that. You got to know when to make your moves, kind of like macking, you know, kind of like pimping, right? Is that correct?
Pimping
Would that
ain't
be safe
easy.
to say? Okay, I got that.
Fear Factory then get interviewed. They say Chris Jericho is a Fear Factory fan. Of course he is. But Fear Factory are fans of the Nitro Girls, so fuck you, Y2J. Kid Rock then introduces the wrestlers. Billy Kidman managed to get suckered into another one of these shit shows, and we learn that Billy Kidman's favourite band is the Beastie Boys. Kid Rock says Kidman's beastly in the ring. Hugh Morris's favourite music video is the Ramones' Rock and Roll High School, and Kid Rock says if Morris had his way, he'd make mincemeat out of Marilyn Manson. The same thing that Conan apparently said at Snow Brawl.
And if he had his way, he'd make mincemeat out of Marilyn Manson. Yeah, go figure that out.
Weighs 250 pounds and would love to kick Marilyn Manson's ass.
Sounds like some MTV jagoff who didn't like Marilyn Manson wrote these cue cards. Morris wears a Fear Factory shirt to the ring and Raven rips him apart for doing so, saying it's bad form to wear a band shirt at one of their gigs. Apparently Rey Mysterio's favourite band is Pantera and his dream tag team partner would be Snoop Dogg. Kid Rock says that Chris Jericho is a Metallica freak even though it says his favourite band Skid Row on the screen. And Chris cuts a promo after making his entrance. It's probably the best thing about this show. Chris gets the audience fired up, he asks if the fans are having fun, and then he swerves the crowd.
We know what the problem with all that is you should all be home trying to increase your intelligence and quit wasting your parents' money.
He does have a point there.
Chris says these people will end up taking orders at Harry's Burgers if they don't change their ways. Raven wonders where this burger establishment is because he's never heard of it. Chavo Guerrero's favourite music video is Michael Jackson's Thriller, and Perry Saturn likes AC/DC and Marilyn Manson. There's Marilyn Manson again. Saturn's all over the ring girl and Raven cheers him on from the commentary table. And then we go to commercial break, but first, Kid Rock's just gotta be Kid Rock.
Stick around like some Backstreet Boys groupies. Stay tuned to MTV's Beach Brawl.
Right here in Cancun, mother.
We come back, we get more Nitro Girl dancing. Jimmy Hart thinks either Hugh Morris or Chris Jericho is going to win this thing, while Raven gives us a tri-cast. He thinks Morris is going to win, Kidman's going to place, and Saturn will show. The match gets underway, not with a ring bell, not with a pigeon falling out of the air, but Kid Rock saying this.
So here we go. Fear Factory, make like Jenna Jameson's in front of you and hit it!
So Fear Factory begin playing as the match gets underway, and look at the camera cuts here. If you tuned in to see WCW Wrestling, you aren't going to see much of it. If you tuned in to see Fear Factory, you're not going to see much of them either. If you wanted to hear Fear Factory's live performance, then you'll have Jimmy Hart, Raven and Kid fucking Rock talking all over the audio. So it begs the question, who exactly was this aimed at? It pleases nobody. The camera cuts make the wrestling match really difficult to talk about, but I'll give it a shot. Saturn hits a leg drop on Mysterio and Kid Rock calls this an ass cracker. Mysterio sets Kidman on the top rope and the wasted Raven says this.
Rey Mysterio Jr. up to the top. Here we go. Should be some sign of Karana, or however you pronounce it.
Mysterio and Kidman stay perched on the top rope for ages, maybe waiting for a cameraman to come back or something, I don't know. But in that time frame, Hugh Morris pulls off an elbow drop on Chavo, and then Mysterio pulls off a top rope bulldog. It begins to feel like a clip show as we see Saturn pull off a Falcon Arrow, and then he performs a top rope leg drop. The cuts to Fear Factory are really, really annoying. Saturn and Hugh Morris fight on the outside, and Raven does not give a flying fuck about this match. He wants to know where the party is after the show.
So, not to interrupt the action, but what's the party scene after this? Where are you going?
Yeah, really, let's get down to business, right? What's going on later today?
Absolutely.
Jimmy Hart hasn't said half as much as what he did at Snow Brawl. Either it's due to editing, Kid Rock getting on his nerves, Raven's unprofessionalism, or Jimmy can't keep his eyes off the spring breakers in attendance. Morris has a perfect chance to eliminate Mysterio, but he decides to throw him onto Kidman and Chavo instead. That makes absolutely no sense. Morris then misses the no laughing matter moonsault, and the rest of the competitors decide to gang up and throw Morris out. The show then goes to commercial break, we come back and the focus is immediately put on Fear Factory. You could be a Fear Factory fan and this is what you wanted to see, so you gotta be fair too. When we get to in-ring action, Saturn has his dress over Jericho's head and Raven thinks this is amazing. Chavo gets eliminated by Jericho, the commentators have a little fun at Chavo's expense.
Hey Chavo, beat it, Chavo, beat it. Beat it. Don't make me stand up, I'm commentating. I'll pull it.
Don't make Raven get up and get you, man. Don't even come over here with that.
And man, I think Chavo would fuck Kid Rock up. Saturn hits a great looking German suplex in the ring on Mysterio, and what's evident here is that the guys are actually working hard in the ring, but the production style is doing the match no favours at all. Snow Brawl was presented way better, but the wrestling wasn't nearly as good. Jericho eliminates Kidman, Ray gets a good look up Saturn's dress next, and Jericho then eliminates Saturn. It comes down to Jericho and Mysterio, and again, it looks like they're doing some good work against each other, but you don't really get a good look at the action. Ray hits an Arabian Press moonsault and he follows this up with a Bronco Buster. Jericho ends up catching Ray and he gets crotched on the top rope, and Mysterio ends up getting eliminated. Chris Jericho's the king of spring break. As the crowd chants Jericho sucks, Jericho accepts his award.
Get a little static. What's up with that? First of all, Rock Kid, I just want to say I'm so Kid Rock excited to win an award on MTV.
That's good. Saturn ends up hitting the ring to attack Chris, just like Conan did to Adams at Snow Brawl. The trophy ends up getting destroyed and it's thrown into the sea where it rightfully belongs. It's now buried treasure. Pirates have tried to find the coveted Beach Brawl trophy for over 20 years and it still hasn't been located. Kid Rock tells the fans that there's a party in his room tonight and everyone's invited, and the show ends with another dance from the Nitro Girls. I honestly think Raven was completely checked out of WCW at this point, and he'd only last for another few months anyway before packing his bags and rejoining ECW. As for Chris Jericho, well, when he won this thing, he already informed Eric Bischoff that he wasn't signing a new contract. Chris wrote in his book, I wrestled a battle royal during MTV Spring Break in Cancun. I won and went out drinking for 14 hours straight with the host, a relative unknown named Kid Rock, who I referred to as Rock Kid in celebration. Only in WCW could you get a bigger push and a hell of a party when you were leaving the company. I'm not so sure this was a push, Chris. I think WCW just didn't give a shit either way. So, another waste of time, another WCW blunder. MTV execs knew that wrestling was hot around this time period, and even years later, they'd pick up the unintentionally hilarious Wrestling Society X and air around 9 or 10 episodes of that, although they went a step further with added audio and visual effects. Snow Brawl and Beach Brawl took place when everyone wanted a piece of the wrestling pie, and well, both shows let us see how production can suffer when wrestling falls into the hands of folks who never produced a wrestling show before. And I get it too, these were made for MTV, they were MTV productions featuring WCW wrestlers, and they were broadcasted on a music channel. Well, it used to be a music channel. This isn't Monday Nitro and this isn't even Thunder, but you're still expecting something, anything, to come of this. Wrestling and music managed to coexist 15 years earlier, and the whole WWF MTV rock and wrestling thing helped to bring attention to the World Wrestling Federation, but I think the WCW and MTV partnership would have honestly turned people away. I mean, who would have watched this and said, yeah, I'm going to start watching WCW every Monday night? It's fucking baffling to think that these shows really benefited nobody. Not MTV, not WCW, not the wrestlers involved, not the fans, not Kid Rock, not Raven, not the guy who fell off when snowboarding. Nobody. Maybe a better idea would have been to have one singles match at Snow Brawl where the heel wins, have the rematch build up on Nitro, and then host that match on MTV Beach Brawl. I don't know, anything has to be better than 6 or 7 man battle royals for shitty trophies. That'll do it for this one though. I don't know what else to say. Absolute crap. I've saved you the trouble of watching the whole shows yourself, but if you really must see these in their entirety, then don't say I didn't warn you. Thanks for watching guys, and take care. Lex Luger's time as an active professional wrestler is really fascinating to look back on. It feels like at certain points of his career, Lex really had it all. His early work in the NWA has been praised as some of the best work of his entire career, and he had a true resurgence and genuine unmanufactured popularity in WCW from mid-1996 onwards. Looking back at Lex's work during this time period on Reliving the War proves that there's many misconceptions out there about Luger. Yes, the Lex Express stuff in the WWF is worthy of criticism, but he was red hot during the early days of the WCW NWO feud. As time went on, and as WCW started to change and go through its own highs and lows, Lex tried to change with the times too. He became part of the NWO Wolfpack, the red and black version of the NWO that also became very popular. But when the NWO stuff started to dry up, and when WCW attempted to build a future that didn't involve its most popular storyline and faction, Lex went through another change. Now, I'm not saying that Lex should have been winning world championships at this point, and I'm not saying Lex could have reverted back to a 1997 babyface and carried the company into the new millennium, but what you have to understand before continuing on here, and what you have to keep in the back of your mind as we look at this character evolution, is that Lex Luger was once one of WCW's most beloved superstars, and that's not an exaggeration. Again, those who join me every week for Reliving the War would know that Lex had an incredible following, and if you don't believe me, just watch his appearances in matches during 1997. Trust me, I too was part of the echo chamber when it came to Lex Luger, but watching it all back made me realise that superstars today would kill for the same crowd reactions that Luger received. No one will ever consider Luger the greatest wrestler in the world, let's make that clear, but Lex was ultra over. He could have been someone the company went back to if they just kept him a straight babyface, but this is late WCW we're talking about here. Lex would get injured at the beginning of 1999, and when he came back later in the year, he said the old Lex Luger was dead while promising to show us the next evolution of his character. The presentation was a little weird, the change itself was forgettable, and it could very well be argued that the Lex Luger we're going to look at today is the worst Lex Luger to grace our TV screens. Okay, first of all, the injury that happened on Thunder. Lex was preparing for a tag team match at Super Brawl 9 against Conan and Rey Mysterio. Kevin Nash was going to be his partner. On the February 18th, 99 edition of Thunder, Luger got legitimately injured when Rey Mysterio slammed a limousine door into Luger's biceps. Luger was taken out of the Super Brawl match, although he still made an appearance at the show. Luger had to take time off, and during his time away from the ring, WCW went through drastic changes. You'd think you were watching a completely different wrestling company by the time Luger came back. Sting was getting ready to wrestle Hulk Hogan on the August 23rd episode of Nitro, and Lex Luger came back to warn Sting not to trust the Hulkster. Hogan was back in the red and yellow, and this didn't sit well with Luger. Sting said he had to take the title opportunity and he didn't really have any other option. Right enough, there was interference during the Sting vs Hogan main event, and Sting didn't win the championship, but it wasn't instigated by Hogan. Goldberg and Luger come out to clear the ring. Hogan promises to give Sting another shot, and he also says Luger and Goldberg can watch their backs while they have the match. The next week, Luger cut a promo with Mean Gene Okerlund, and he said he had undeniable, concrete, irrefutable evidence that Hulk Hogan was a con man, that Hulk Hogan was still up to no good, and that Hulk Hogan was scamming everyone. Luger said the evidence was going to arrive to Monday Nitro, and all the fans had to do was wait. Hogan came out later and he pretty much said he doesn't care, his hands are clean and Luger has nothing on him. Hulk says he'll wait in the back and see what Lex Luger produces. Lex comes back out later and he wants Sting to join him in the ring. Luger's holding an envelope, and Luger says inside the envelope is proof that Hulk Hogan was pretty busy while he was out rehabbing his injured knee. Back in June, Kevin Nash was hit by a Hummer while Big Sexy sat in a limousine. We thought this storyline had been dropped when Kevin Nash battled Randy Savage, the man who orchestrated the attack, but the true identity of the driver was never revealed. Lex shows Sting what's in the envelope, and there's Hulk Hogan in an NWO shirt standing beside the white Hummer. Hogan comes out and he says this doesn't prove anything. Luger says Hulk tried to end Nash's career. And Sting seems to side with Luger here. Tempers begin to flare and security steps in. And at the very end of Nitro, Sting goes into Hogan's dressing room, and who does he find sitting there? The Macho Man Randy Savage. The next week, Hogan said the photo was doctored. Hogan does indeed drive a Hummer, but his Hummer doesn't match the one that hit Nash back in June. Sting and Luger want to discuss the photo with Hulk backstage, and the two visit Hogan's locker room. Bret Hart's here having a conversation with the Hulkster. Hogan says he'll give Sting 5 minutes to discuss the photo. We go to commercial break, and when we come back, Sting's been knocked out. Luger blames Hogan, Hogan and Bret blame Luger. No one knows who attacked the Stinger. Goldberg, Hogan and Sting were set to face Rick Steiner, Sid and DDP in a cage match in the main event. Sting arrives late to the match and Luger tries to stop the Stinger from joining his teammates, but Sting goes anyway. The babyfaces win the match and Luger argues with Sting afterwards. Lex is trying to tell Sting that it was Hogan who attacked him earlier on. So, we get the Fall Brawl. Sting vs Hogan is our main event, and the big question is, who can Sting trust? DDP interferes in the match, Bret Hart gets involved, Sid Vicious runs in too, and finally Lex Luger makes an appearance holding Sting's baseball bat. Hogan takes Luger out with a big boot, and Sting picks up the bat. Hogan tells Sting that Luger was lying all along. He wants Sting to hand over the bat, but Sting attacks Hogan and he turns heel. It was all a big setup. Hogan gets knocked out, he can't raise his hand for the third time while in the Scorpion Deathlock, so Sting wins the match and he becomes the new World Heavyweight Champion. He embraces Lex Luger afterwards, so not only did Sting turn heel at Fall Brawl, but so did Lex Luger. Luger hadn't worked as a heel in WCW since rejoining the company back in 1995. The next night, on the September 13th episode of Nitro, Sting and Lex confirmed their new heel status by attacking Ric Flair and by beating Bret Hart and Hulk Hogan in a tag team match. Luger used the baseball bat during the bout. So now we've established exactly where Lex Luger was and how he got up to this point. This is where it begins to get a little weird. Everything up to this point has been pretty straightforward stuff. We can talk about WCW's decision to turn Sting heel another time, because right now we're going to focus on the death of Lex Luger. Well, the death of Lex Luger as we knew him. On the 27th of September episode of Nitro, we get brought into a funeral home. We see a book of condolence with Lex Luger's name above it. In the sitting room, there's a lady with her face covered in a veil, and Lex Luger's in the coffin. We then see the ghost of Lex Luger leave his physical body, and the ghost talks to us. I'm not kidding. The ghost of Lex Luger says, "Here lies Lex Luger, a fine man, a great champion, but he's no longer with us." The lady walks towards the camera. We then go to the graveyard. The woman approaches Luger's grave, and once again, spooky Luger shows up. He watches the flowers getting thrown onto his casket, and then we go to the arena. Before we go on, can we please just take a moment to appreciate the ghost of Lex Luger? This is fucking nuts, and it also feels unnecessary. Like, they literally killed the character to introduce a new one, but it's not like Lex Luger even had a character. He was just, Lex Luger, the total package, all that stuff. He didn't play a character, he was just himself, really. This kind of thing works for those superstars who lean more towards the supernatural side of pro wrestling, but for a straight up wrestler with no real gimmick to speak of, it's just strange. The lady walks out into the arena. She unveils herself as Miss Elizabeth as ominous music plays in the background. She walks down to the ring, and this all feels very grand. The darkened arena lights along with the music make it feel like something big's about to happen. Is this going to be some sort of supernatural version of Lex Luger? No, he's the exact same. Lex Luger is in the ring and Tony Schiavone explains that the commentary team were told earlier that evening that Lex Luger is not to be called Lex Luger anymore. This is the total package. Nothing more, nothing less. Luger poses in the ring showing off his body for the first time since making his return, and the commentators say this is the rebirth. Lex Luger is no more. You're expecting more, to be honest. The ghost thing was absolutely hilarious and silly, but it teased something big. Miss Elizabeth's entrance was good, it built up suspense for just a little moment, and well, the rest was really nothing we hadn't seen before, with the exception of Flexi Lexi's new muscular body. I don't know, some people may have liked this, but I think the payoff wasn't great. There's another major problem though. WCW could have left it like this and make fans tune in next week to learn more about this new this new total package. But they have him work in the main event. He teams up with Sting and DDP to face Bret Hart and Ric Flair, and we see him backstage before the match acting like the same old Lex Luger. He comes to the ring with DDP and Sting while Sting's music plays, so we don't get to see a new entrance or anything like that. And he wrestles the exact same way too, only difference being he's got a new logo on his trunks and knee pads. That's the only difference I can see between the Lex Luger of old and the new total package. The following week we got to see Luger's entrance. He comes down to the ring with a sleeveless shirt on along with Miss Elizabeth. His entrance theme has been updated to the same music that played during the whole Rebirth promo. He gets in the ring while a circle of spotlights surrounds him, the shirt comes off and we get a little posing. It kinda reminds me of the narcissist Lex Luger, even though it's still completely different, but Lex being obsessed with his body sort of harkens back to his early WWF work. It does make you wonder though, why do this? Why go through the trouble of changing the name, changing the music, adding a little colour to your gear when, in essence, it's the exact same as it was before? I wish I knew the answer. I'm guessing it was all done because Lex was now a heel, but imagine if every wrestler who turned heel also died and cut a promo as a spooky ghost, topping it all off with a name change. I said it before, but unnecessary is the word that springs to mind. Luger would continue like this right up until the closure of WCW, which means he also flip-flopped around from heel to babyface when Vince Russo took control, and you know what it's like explaining all that stuff. So what we'll do now is look at some of the more noteworthy matches that the total package took part in. At Halloween Havoc 99, the total package faced Bret Hart, and Luger actually made the Hitman submit in this match, something you don't see all that often. The total package had injured Bret the week prior with a baseball bat, so Bret went in hurt. A half Boston Crab made Hart tap out, so it should have been considered a pretty big win for Luger, but it kinda feels forgotten about. The match itself wasn't good. Luger pretty much did absolutely nothing. He took a beating from Bret right at the opening bell, and the only real offense he pulled off was the half Boston Crab. It should have been better. I should also mention that Sting dropped the world title later that evening to Goldberg. Luger would then, in storyline, begin treating Miss Elizabeth bad. At WCW Mayhem, the total package was scheduled to take on Ming. Luger said he was suffering from a bad neck injury at the hands of Bret Hart and he wouldn't be able to compete. But Ming didn't want to hear any excuses. Lex worked the match while wearing a neck brace. Clearly there was nothing wrong with him. And Liz was supposed to blind Ming with mace, but she had a little trouble using the bottle. This ended up looking really bad, and it looked like Liz had intentionally spread Lex, even though it wasn't meant to look that way, but nonetheless, this started a chain of events where Luger and Elizabeth's relationship would become more and more strained. Lex tried to put Liz in a match with Ming. Yeah, a match with Ming as punishment. That's wild. Liz ran away and she locked herself in a cage. Lex managed to get the key from Liz while she was still locked in, and he promised to drop the cage into the ring later on if he had to. Luger was hell-bent on feeding Elizabeth to Ming. Sting walked by and Liz would ask for some help, and Sting said no, there was no way out of this. Liz ends up getting dropped in the ring via a forklift truck, and Ming has some trouble getting through the metal bars, so the total package tries to hand the key over to Ming. Luger takes a Tongan death grip for his trouble, and just when Liz was about to get grabbed, Sting came out to save the day. After freeing Liz, Sting has a match with Ming. Liz comes back out and she tries to help Sting by using the mace, but Sting won't allow her to do so. The total package ends up coming down to get Liz, but Sting once again saves her, and this heroic act leads to Sting losing the match. This kind of thing would continue on. Luger threatened to sue Liz and he presented court documents to her backstage. He promised the powers that be that Liz would take part in a mud bath match on Nitro, and when Liz refused, the total package lifted her up and he threw her into the mud. Lex had gone from the total package to the total dickhead. Once again, Sting saved the day, and it looked like Sting was showing more and more sympathy towards Liz. Liz even protected Sting from a chair shot from Luger, and she helped Sting in beating Luger in a Nitro tag match. It looked like Liz was completely done with Lex and she had moved on. To make this right, Luger wanted a match with Sting, and that match would take place at Starrcade 99. At Starrcade, Liz, wearing her own Sting gear, was handed a bottle of mace from Sting. Sting said this is the good stuff, the extra strength stuff, and Liz was told to get rid of her other bottle. Liz brought the Stinger down to the ring for his match against Luger, and Liz would help Sting during the early moments of the bout. At one point, Liz runs into the ring and it looks like she's checking to see if Luger's okay. Sting knew this was going to happen, he was too used to the swerves, bro. So he also went through the trouble of giving Liz a can of silly string, not a can of highly concentrated mace. The jig was up. This had been another long swerve. Sting sends Liz out of the ring and he continues the match. He goes for the deathlock, but Liz again tries to interfere, this time with a baseball bat. Sting tells her to put it down. She follows his orders. Sting turns his back and he ends up getting smacked across the face anyway. The ref rules the match a DQ, but Liz and Luger aren't finished yet. Liz puts Sting's hand in a chair and Luger proceeds to destroy Sting's wrist and arm. This is something Luger would do to other opponents following this matchup. It all ends with Sting getting carried up the entranceway. Luger and Liz would then show up to Nitro and Thunder with Lex dressed up as Sting, somehow managing to look even worse than NWO Sting. The real Stinger stayed out of action for a few weeks, but he'd send messages to Luger letting him know that he was coming after him. This would go on for quite some time. Sting was expected to return at the end of January, but that didn't happen. So Luger would move his focus onto a new tag team with Ric Flair, known as Team Package. These two would feud with Hulk Hogan, and the Sting return match didn't happen until Uncensored. Sting ended up winning the match. The match was contested under Lumberjack rules, with the Lumberjacks wearing casts. The Lumberjacks had all gotten their arms broke by the total package. Boy, that's a lot of injuries right there. And Luger tried to even the odds by bringing out the Harris Brothers and Harlem Heat 2000 as his own Lumberjacks, but it didn't matter. Liz tried to get involved, but Vampiro and Jimmy Hart kept her away. The Lumberjacks all fought each other and they ended up going back up the entranceway. And Sting got the win when Vampiro hit Luger with the baseball bat. It felt like a long build-up with a pretty average ending. There's not much point in going much further because the New Blood angle would then begin in WCW, and with that, babyfaces and heels switched roles and everything that was established previously got thrown in the bin. Luger would become a face in the Millionaires Club while still teaming with Flair. 1 week fans were being conditioned to boo Flair and Luger, and the next they were expected to cheer them. Flair was fine in this department, by the way, but Luger definitely suffered. Since coming back from the biceps injury, Luger had done absolutely everything he could to get fans to hate him, and as much as I don't think he should have turned heel in the first place, he done a pretty good job of being pretty unlikable. It was too late for the total package to go back to the old 1997 Lex Luger, so he just carried on getting lukewarm receptions. WCW did try to push Luger again by once again turning him heel and having him work matches at Mayhem and Starrcade against Bill Goldberg. The latter had Goldberg's career on the line, but WCW was dead in the water by this point and nobody cared. Luger would then form a short-lived tag team with Buff Bagwell named Totally Buffed, but that's a story for another time. The short of it is though, again, nobody really cared. Luger changing to the total package kind of captures where WCW was at this point. They were all over the place with no clear plan on what's going to come next. We talked about how redundant the character change was, but making redundant decisions was something WCW would do as a whole as time went on. The company had done something with Luger at one point, the same way the company had done something during the Monday Night Wars, but it all went south and people stopped caring, and once people stop caring, it's incredibly difficult to get those people back. Did the total package stuff tarnish Luger's legacy? I'm not sure. I think Elizabeth's passing and the circumstances surrounding her passing may be a more contributing factor there, but in a professional sense, the total package definitely didn't do Luger any favours. Maybe he was past the point of unwavering popularity too, though. It's hard to say because after the Wolfpack collapsed, he was pretty much immediately turned heel upon his return. But anyway, that's going to do it for today. Personally, I didn't care much for the Reborn Lex Luger, and I think it's a shame that the company never really truly capitalised on Luger's newfound WCW popularity in the mid to late 90s, but let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching guys, and take care. Here's a WCW blunder for you. Glacier, a frosty fan favourite over on the Reliving the War series. Ray Lloyd got dealt a rough hand in terms of his WCW debut. Those who watched my channel and those who watched Nitro back in 1996 would remember the constant Blood Runs Cold vignettes and how Glacier's arrival in WCW was delayed over and over again. When Glacier was finally revealed through yet more vignettes, the character was met with indifference. The Mortal Kombat inspiration was painfully obvious, we don't need to get into all that, but the whole Glacier reveal also, in a way, represented a slight identity crisis for World Championship Wrestling. The NWO's arrival felt cutting edge. The lengths WCW went through to make the New World Order feel real was something that made fans pay close attention to Monday Nitro, and when you compare the unpredictability of this outlaw faction trying to take over a company to a Sub-Zero ripoff giving us martial arts demonstrations on top of his ice palace, then Glacier ends up looking passé before he even has a debut match. Glacier may have been a new wrestler, but it felt like he wouldn't have been out of place in WCW a few years prior. Still, the one thing that Ray Lloyd had going for him was the fact that he wasn't bad at all in the ring. He brought something new to the table in terms of his moveset, and while it's very easy for us to look back and laugh at the blatant Mortal Kombat ripoff, God knows I do it enough, but Glacier was spared becoming total meme material thanks to how well he performed in the ring. Also, those who have met Ray and spoke with Ray say that he's an awesome guy too, so this would lead you to think that all Ray had to do was ditch the Glacier gimmick and try something else, right? Surely it was just the Glacier gimmick that was holding him back, and a change of character would work wonders for this guy. Well, yeah, Glacier was gone by August of 1999, and Ray Lloyd sure did get himself a new gimmick, and somehow, I don't know how they did it, but somehow, WCW managed to give Ray something even worse than the Glacier character. This is just one of the downfalls that we're going to look at today. Here is the multiple downfalls of Glacier. This should be fun. Eric Bischoff said that Glacier was created as a WCW marketing project, and if that's the case, WCW seriously failed. Bischoff said the driving force behind the Glacier character was merchandising, things like action figures and video games, and I say WCW failed in that department because they didn't even bother bringing out an official Glacier action figure, and there was no Blood Runs Cold video game either. Yes, you may say Glacier was featured in WCW Revenge, but so was Jim Neidhart, and the Anvil didn't have to dress up like Sub-Zero to get a spot either. With that in mind, Glacier certainly wasn't the first gimmick created with the sole intention of selling merchandise, and Eric Bischoff did hold a lot of experience in sales and marketing. The intentions aren't the problem here, but the fact that Glacier only got this race car toy and not a fully fledged action figure kinda shows us that WCW shit the bed with its initial idea. You've got Wrath and Mortis too, again two good wrestlers portraying Glacier's biggest enemies, and they too wouldn't have looked out of place in a Mortal Kombat game or a Saturday morning cartoon. But as time went on, you could tell that nobody, not a single soul, knew what to do with the Glacier story arc. It was the NWO bringing in the merchandise money, not the Sub-Zero knockoff. So in terms of generating revenue, it made sense for the marketing department to put all their focus onto the NWO, and boy did they ever go overboard. NWO posters, NWO pins, multiple variations of the NWO shirt. It seemed like every other week new NWO merchandise was being advertised, and you know what? It made good business sense. Fans wanted to buy this stuff. The NWO brand was probably making more money than every other superstar's merchandise put together. What fans clearly didn't want to buy was a Glacier shirt, a Glacier replica helmet, or heaven forbid, a Glacier video game. The Blood Runs Cold storyline was nowhere near as successful as Eric Bischoff had hoped, but it did provide fans with a change of pace during WCW television shows. As big as the NWO were, fans weren't going to sit through full shows dominated by the New World Order, and Bischoff's attempts at creating NWO exclusive shows proves this. As silly as it was at times, the Blood Runs Cold storyline was different from everything else on WCW television, and I thought this was fine. It remained in the mid-card, it didn't eat up too much TV time, and we got to see some good performers in the ring while all this was going down. At the beginning of 1998 though, the company decided to end the Blood Runs Cold storyline and turn Glacier heel, because why the fuck not? It's not like the story was going anywhere at this point anyway. On the January 24th, 1998 episode of Saturday Night, Glacier turned on his friend Ernest Miller, and he let Mortis and Wrath score a tag team victory, which technically means Mortis and Wrath were the winners of the whole Blood Runs Cold feud. If you thought big things were on the horizon for the evil Frosty Balls, then you've got another thing coming. Glacier went on a losing streak after turning heel, made all the more noteworthy because he spent his debut year being undefeated in singles competition. It's usually at this point in a superstar's career when it all goes downhill. We have seen it countless times. An idea fails, but the guy's still on payroll, so just use him and get other people over. But WCW, to their credit, did try a few more times with Glacier. Still, those few months Glacier spent losing matches did him absolutely no favours. He was already perceived as a lower mid-card guy at this point, and losing to the likes of Steve Mongo McMichael and Prince Iaukea on Nitro didn't help matters. Another thing that didn't help too, Glacier would limit his moveset considerably when wrestling as a bad guy. The commentators even made a point of saying that Glacier was now focusing on pro wrestling and not martial arts. So one of the things that made Glacier stand out, one of the only redeemable qualities he had from a TV standpoint, was also taken away. And I get it, taking away fancy kicks and unique moves gives the crowd less opportunities to cheer, but WCW was also giving people more reason not to care about Glacier. Let's call everything we just talked about downfall number 1. The televised losing streak came to an end on May 11th, 1998 when Glacier got a win over Sick Boy, a member of Raven's flock. Before the match, Glacier cut a promo saying that one of the things he brought with him to WCW during his debut was the cryonic kick. Glacier felt like too many people were ripping off the move, but nobody could do it better than old Frosty Balls himself. So, if Glacier caught anyone trying to steal his finisher, no matter who it was, Glacier would take them out. After Glacier defeated Sick Boy, Perry Saturn hit the ring to launch an attack. On the 25th of May episode of Nitro, Glacier cut another promo where he said he knew there would be imitators when he brought the cryonic kick to WCW. Perry Saturn's running around saying his kick is better than the original and Glacier isn't gonna stand for it. Glacier mocks Saturn for how he dresses, that's ironic, and Glacier says what he created is something he can also destroy. So Glacier challenges Saturn to a match to see who has the best kick. The match happens later on Nitro and it ended with Saturn performing the Death Valley Driver, not a kick. Brilliant. Saturn had another storyline going on. Raven was trying to get Saturn back in the flock, so Raven and his cronies were getting involved and causing distractions throughout this whole mini feud. On Thunder later in the week, Glacier wrestled Van Hammer. Glacier locked in the rings of Saturn during the match, so Saturn came down, he hit Glacier with a cryonic kick, and Glacier took another Death Valley Driver. The two would then trade victories over the next 2 episodes of Thunder. In the first match, Kenyon dressed up as a referee and he took out Saturn. Kenyon then pulled out the Mortis mask and he showed it to Glacier before Frosty Balls pinned Perry Saturn, but this was merely a tease and nothing more. On the following Thunder, Saturn defeated Glacier. The flock once again got involved and Glacier got distracted, but Saturn once again put Glacier away with a Death Valley Driver. And then Glacier faced Goldberg on the 29th of June 1998 episode of Nitro. This wasn't Glacier's first match with Bill Goldberg. The two had a match the month prior that ended in 2 minutes, and they had 2 other matches before that. But this one right here is a match that Ray Lloyd wouldn't forget. During the bout, Glacier suffered a knee injury, a pretty serious knee injury that would keep him out of action for around 5 months. It looks like this leg lock caused the injury. Glacier grabs his knee immediately after the move, but to his credit, he did finish the match. Goldberg, of course, won the bout after a spear and a jackhammer. Glacier would have to take some time off. He'd make his comeback on the November 5th episode of Thunder, and he offered his support to Ernest Miller. Miller had also turned heel by this point. Glacier was rocking some new gear too, not sure if this was an improvement or not, but it sure was different. And Glacier said guys like he and Miller will never get a break in WCW, so the two should watch each other's backs. Ernest Miller didn't seem to care all that much. The next week, Glacier had his return match, once again on Thunder. He wrestled Chris Adams in the opening contest, but before the match would begin, Glacier once again said he's the originator of the cryonic kick, and guys like Chris Adams were ripping him off. Adams was actually credited as one of the first wrestlers to use the super kick. In the end, Adams hits Glacier with the kick, but Sonny Ono and Ernest Miller get involved. Glacier then shows off his new finisher afterwards, the ice pick. And yeah, Glacier's back in the opening matches of Thunder. Not exactly the comeback story of the year, but it's better than nothing. Monday Nitro on the 11th of November was a bit of a weird one. Raven refused to wrestle Wrath, so Kenyon jumped in the ring to begin his match with Glacier. Wrath ends up wiping out both Kenyon and Glacier, and this sets up a Wrath vs Glacier match at World War III. Good example though of how things had changed in WCW. Just a year earlier, these guys were way more in character in terms of the blood runs cold stuff, but at this point, all three men were very different. Anyway, at World War III, Wrath defeated Glacier, and this was Glacier's last WCW pay-per-view match, even though he stuck around for another year. At this point, it was decided that Ray needed a complete change of character. He went on another losing streak. There was no moving up the cards for Ray, so drastic times called for drastic measures. On the February 11th episode of Thunder, Glacier said Ernest Miller may be a world karate champion, but he doesn't have the biggest and best entrance of all time. This is something Glacier could provide the cat with. Glacier then pokes fun at his own debut, saying he got sick of watching the video vignettes just like everyone else, but he was able to debut with the biggest ring entrance of all time, and Glacier is willing to sell his entrance for a reasonable fee. Sonny Ono cuts a deal and the cat gets the entrance. Kaz Hayashi comes along, Sonny Ono does some wheeling and dealing, and Hayashi ends up overpaying for Glacier's iconic entrance gear. This is downfall number 2. Here's a man admitting his gimmick was absolutely shit. Glacier wanted to leave it all behind, and he was willing to sell his gear and his entrance and pretty much his identity to whoever was stupid enough to buy it. I mean, it's funny, but it's also miserable at the same time. The cat came out to Glacier's music, but he was annoyed about the lack of lasers and heavy snow in the ring, so he got rid of the entrance the following week. Kaz Hayashi would come out a few times wearing Glacier's gear, but that too was soon scrapped. Glacier then completely disappeared from WCW television. The gimmick ended with Glacier making fun of his debut, selling his shit, and riding off into the sunset. I really want to joke about this, but I can't think of a better way for a guy to disappear. Okay, so are you ready for downfall number 3? Ray Lloyd wasn't done in WCW just yet. Oh no. Glacier was gone, that fact remained true, but what comes next will make you wish that Glacier never left in the first place. The summer of '99 in WCW wasn't a great summer in terms of creativity, and what we have here, folks, is a fine example of why WCW was rapidly going down the toilet. WCW Thunder, August 19th, 1999. Mike tonight says we're going to take a look at a guy who will soon debut in WCW. And there he is, Coach Buzz Stern. Fucking hell. Buzz Stern is here to teach guys how to be proper athletes. He's strict, he's disciplined, and he's also a dick. Rule 1, Buzz Stern makes all the rules. Rule 2, if a trainee has any questions at all, they need to refer back to Rule 1. Okay. Buzz says if these jabronis want to make it, they need to follow the coach's 3 S's. Sweat plus sacrifice equals success. The next week we see Buzz Stern in the WCW power plant. It looks like that guy in the background is butt naked. Fuck's sake. Yeah, Buzz is giving his trainees a hard time, but he wants everyone to succeed. I'm not sure what they were thinking with this stuff, but hey, at least it provides good Blunder material. The week after that, the coach announced the first member of the Buzz Stern Winners Club, the clumsy Luther Biggs. Luther didn't remember a single fucking thing about Stern's 3 S's, but he promised he wouldn't let his coach down. A few weeks later, Biggs was ready for a match. Buzz Stern told Biggs he wasn't the best athlete in the world, but he has heart and he'll never give up. So the coach was gonna bring Biggs to Thunder and Biggs was gonna wrestle. On the 30th of September edition of Thunder, Biggs squared off against Bobby Eaton, and the whole match was met with silence. The audience couldn't have cared less, and they seemed annoyed with Luther's attempts at comedy. They messed up the ending too. Buzz Stern was supposed to dive in and break up a 3 count, but he didn't make it on time. The referee hesitated when counting the 3, but there was nothing the ref could do. Bobby Eaton pins Luther Biggs, and Buzz Stern applies a full Nelson on beautiful Bobby afterwards. For losing the match, Biggs also gets put in a full Nelson, and Buzz Stern rips his trainee apart as they leave the ring. It's absolute dog shit. Luther would win 2 matches on Worldwide and Saturday Night before stepping back in the ring on Thunder. Biggs would face Ming in his final WCW match, and as expected, Luther got annihilated. The Tongan death grip gets applied to both Biggs and Buzz Stern, and I don't know what else to say. This thing just wasn't working, and there wasn't a fan in attendance who cared at all. There's one saving grace here though. This is the episode of Thunder where Kevin Nash was thrown on commentary, and he really didn't give a shit about what he said on TV. Nash talked about how sweet Ming's hair was, and how Luther Biggs should have known he was going to get beaten because WCW aired a video package dedicated to Ming before the match took place. Kevin Nash was not taking this seriously one bit, but that just kinda reflected what everyone else was doing in the arena. The whole Buzz Stern debacle came to an end when Buzz wrestled his final WCW match on the 4th of November episode of Thunder, and hey, at least he went out with a match against a great opponent. Buzz faced Eddie Guerrero before getting released by WCW as a cost-cutting measure, and I'd love to say this bout was good, but it was a standard WCW Thunder match. Absolutely nothing to write home about. Eddie Guerrero wins with his frog splash, Buzz Stern and Luther Biggs take a beating from the Filthy Animals, and the story of Buzz Stern and the story of Glacier comes to an end. Or did it? Redemption stories usually have a way of making us feel good, and in wrestling, a good successful return can quickly become the talk of the whole wrestling world. Ray Lloyd had a chance at redemption, but seeing as his WCW comeback would take place at the beginning of 2001, you should already know that this wasn't the feel-good story that many people hoped for, or probably didn't hope for. At WCW Mayhem 2000, a familiar vignette played. The old 1996 Blood Runs Cold video was broadcasted during the pay-per-view, and this could only mean one thing: the old, original Glacier was gonna make a comeback. Like before, these promos would air on WCW television for a couple of weeks, as WCW intentionally, or unintentionally, recaptured the frustration that many felt in 1996 when these fucking things wouldn't stop airing on Nitro. Blood runs colder, apparently. Frosty Balls gets more frosty, and you know what? I could actually see some fans getting into this. I mean, WCW was not what it was in late 2000 or early 2001. A callback to the glory days of 96 and 97 may have been welcomed by some fans who were still hardcore enough to watch WCW during this time period. Norman Smiley was absolutely ecstatic that a real hero was on his way back to WCW, and Glacier even sent a message to Norman saying if he ever needed help, Glacier would be there for him. Well, Norman did need help almost right away, but Glacier didn't show up. Norman was the victim of underhanded tactics by the Harris brothers, so Norman expected help, and he didn't get it. On the 24th of January 2001 episode of Thunder though, Norman got a surprise when a certain hero of his was waiting to greet him backstage. Glacier had returned and he was here to back up Norman Smiley. Norman wrestled a match against Mike Awesome, he clearly needed help again, and out comes Glacier wearing a brand new attire complete with a new mask, and Glacier was just too busy shaking hands with fans at ringside to even notice what was going on in the ring. Norman tried to get Glacier's attention, but old Chili Chode was way too busy with his adoring fan base. Norman took a loss, Glacier then hit the ring to help out, and when Glacier noticed he was too late, he pushed Norman aside so he could do his little pose routine. The next week, the same thing happened. Norman faced Bam Bam Bigelow, he looked all around for Glacier, but Glacier was way too late because he was too busy giving out high fives. After the bout, Glacier, with a typical superhero voice, said he just got rid of another evildoer in Bam Bam Bigelow. Norman lays on the mat in pain, Glacier poses, and Thunder moves on to its next segment. All this could have maybe went somewhere. I'm not saying it was brilliant, I'm not even saying it was good, but it could have been interesting seeing Glacier act like an oblivious goof while Norman grew increasingly frustrated with his hero's lack of action. It all ended just as quick as it started though. The week after the Bam Bam match, Norman politely asked Glacier to show up on time this week. When Norman left, Sean O'Hare and Chuck Palumbo entered Glacier's locker room and they took out our frosty superhero. Glacier was never seen again on WCW television. And that was the multiple downfalls of Glacier. He had such a rough time in WCW, didn't he? At least he got paid well though, and at least he got out still in good health. He's still associated with pro wrestling to this very day, and that's a fucking miracle seeing how utterly ludicrous some of his WCW storylines were, not to mention the whole idea of the Glacier character itself being laughable to begin with. Over on Reliving the War, we are following the adventures of Glacier on a weekly basis. Sometimes he'll show up, other times he won't, but check out the series if you want to follow Glacier's path to mediocrity. Thanks for watching this one, guys, and take care. WCW seemed to have a thing for musicians coming in during the last few years of the company's existence, and these musicians would do more than just play a few tunes. Master P, the Misfits, ICP, all these guys got used in storylines, but no one was probably more infamous than Kiss and the Kiss Demon. Kiss, a band who had their biggest years from the late 70s to the mid 80s, performed live on WCW Nitro, and on paper it kinda makes sense. Bring in a big over the top band, put them on your TV show, and hope and pray it grabs some attention from folks who maybe haven't seen WCW programming before. There's an argument to be made there though that generally speaking no one really cared about Kiss in 1999, and this could potentially be another colossal waste of money. WCW were paying for a band that didn't have the same following that they once did, and niching down this hard was never going to bring in any big returns. But I digress. I'm not going to talk about how popular Kiss were in 1999, I'm going to talk about the Kiss Demon, a gimmick that was born out of the Kiss live performance on the 23rd of August 1999 edition of Nitro. It's funny, when I research these kind of videos, I always come across articles and posts from folks stating that things like this should have worked, but no, just no. I don't mind taking shit for this one. The Kiss Demon was a horrible idea, and I find it quite funny that diehards would defend this one. Dale Torborg, the guy under the face paint, comes across as a really nice guy in interviews, and he sounds really humble. His stories about WCW and the genesis of the Kiss Demon are very insightful, but I'm talking about the general idea here, the absolute outrageousness of having a guy dressed up in Kiss gear wrestling matches on a TV show that desperately needed more viewers. Strap yourselves in, welcome to another episode of WCW Blunder. This is the Kiss Demon. Dale Torborg played baseball before getting into wrestling. His dad, Jeff Torborg, was a catcher with the Dodgers and Angels before switching to coaching in the late 70s, going on to coach the Yankees and the White Sox. Through his dad, Dale would form a friendship with George Steinbrenner, and another guy who was friendly with Steinbrenner was Hulk Hogan. Dale and Hogan ended up on the same flight from Tampa to LA, where the two spoke about baseball and pro wrestling, and when the plane landed in LAX, Hogan introduced Dale to Randy Savage. When Savage heard Dale's surname, he immediately asked if Dale was Jeff's son. Remember, Savage played minor league baseball. Through this conversation, Dale was asked if he ever considered becoming a pro wrestler, and when Dale realised he was the same height as Hogan and Savage, he thought he could maybe give it a go and see what happens. He was trained by the Warlord and Jim the Anvil Neidhart, and he had his first dark match after just 2 months of training. He would join WCW as part of the Pit Crew tag team along with Chad Fortune, and on the 12th of October 1998, Dale made his Nitro debut, defeating Kendall Windham in what the commentators called an upset victory. Dale's ring time was then severely limited, but he would get another opportunity very, very soon. Eric Bischoff wrote in his book that he met Kiss at the beginning of 1999, and he had discussions with the band about potentially starting up a partnership with WCW. Most of this would centre around licensing deals. Bischoff wrote that Kiss maintained a fan base that would buy anything that had the Kiss name attached to it, so he felt using Kiss on WCW programming could benefit both entities. Eric wrote, "I've never met anyone who understands promotion to the extent that Gene Simmons does. We said if we're going to work together, we need a line of merchandise and collectibles. If we could do that, the licensing alone would be a good return on our investment. As part of our deal to work together, I brought Kiss onto Nitro. I overpaid for their appearance, but in the big picture to launch the Kiss WCW merchandise, it made good sense." In Gene Simmons' book, Sex, Money, Kiss, Gene revealed that he'd also been talking with the World Wrestling Federation in regards to bringing Kiss to the world of pro wrestling. Simmons wrote, "I saw the enormous success of wrestling. For years I'd been telling our legal people to send letters to various wrestlers to cease and desist using similar makeup. It became clearer and clearer to me that wrestling had simply become a Kiss show. The characters wore outfits, and even though they wrestled, the intros to the events were pure Kiss. The pyro came right out of our shows. We went down to New Orleans to be on the Super Bowl TV extravaganza. While we were there, I tracked down Linda and Vince McMahon, the owners and founders of World Wrestling Federation, later Entertainment. I invited them down, and in my hotel room we started talking about Kiss wrestlers. My idea was there would be a demon, a guy who'd been to hell and back, and the Star Child who looked really pretty. Everyone wanted to beat him, but because of his athletic skills, no one could touch him. Linda and Vince loved the idea. We started to negotiate right then and there. I told them I would get back to them. In the meantime, I also spoke with their competition, WCW, and they simply offered a better deal. We signed with them. If we take what Simmons says as the truth, WCW were throwing around big money to secure Kiss, and if we believe what Bischoff said, WCW wanted Kiss for merchandising, trying to target Kiss's die-hard audience and not so much the die-hard wrestling audience. It's been said that Gene Simmons wanted an entire Kiss faction in WCW, and that was apparently part of the agreement. And get this, the Kiss Demon would have to headline a WCW pay-per-view. That's right, a main event match with the Kiss Demon was agreed upon before the character even made its debut. It sounds like this is all backwards. Gene Simmons and Kiss should have been paying WCW for this kind of nonsense. You can understand a live performance on Nitro, but even that's pushing it a little. When you talk about a Kiss Demon, a Kiss faction, and this Kiss Demon headlining a WCW pay-per-view, that's when you get into WCW Blunder territory. If Eric Bischoff agreed to do all this while paying a reported $500,000 just so he could sell WCW action figures while hoping to pop a rating with a Kiss concert on Nitro, then yeah, it's no wonder WCW went down the toilet. It has to be one of the most ridiculous partnerships in wrestling history, and it's hard to believe that anyone saw any upside in this. You may very well love Kiss, and that's all good. I like them too. It doesn't mean there should be a fucking Kiss character main eventing wrestling pay-per-views. There's no justifying it. So, on August 23rd, 1999, in Las Vegas, Nevada, Kiss performed at the very end of WCW Nitro. If you were really into Kiss, then I'm sure you would have had a good time, and certainly the performance would have created a few new, young Kiss fans, but WCW execs wanted a return on their investment. The TV rating came in, the show drew a 2.9, a truly abysmal number, seeing as the week before drew a 3.3, and the week after drew a 4, and the Kiss segment totally bombed with a 2.25 rating. It was laughably bad, and there's no defending this one, guys. Complete shit. The lip sync performance wasn't awful, by the way, but it's crystal clear that wrestling fans didn't want to watch Kiss, and Kiss fans didn't tune in either. Or maybe their diehard fan base had dwindled in numbers. Anyway, the Kiss Demon makes his debut here. Our guy Dale was told he'd be portraying the Demon, but the role was instead given to Bryan Adams. That's right, Crush was the original Kiss Demon, and it didn't take long for Adams to realise that he made a big mistake. Bischoff came up with an idea that would enrage the WCW roster and other members of WCW staff. Inspired by the whole Y2K problem that would occur on New Year's Eve 1999, Eric wanted to put on a WCW pay-per-view named New Year's Evil that also featured a Kiss concert. It would run over the 31st of December and the 1st of January, and immediately you can see why this would piss people off. Nobody wanted to work New Year's Eve, never mind setting up a full pay-per-view production, and so there was a ton of backstage turmoil. Reportedly, guys threatened to walk out if they were forced to work New Year's Eve. And to try and squash the beef, Eric had the brilliant idea of calling everyone into a meeting and verbally ripping everyone apart. This is the well-documented meeting where Raven got up and walked out. This talent meeting also happened at the Las Vegas Nitro where Kiss performed, and Bischoff thought he would fight fire with fire by accusing his performers of using profanities on TV and speaking negatively about WCW to the press. The backstage tensions, the drop in ratings, the shuffling going on within Turner, and the ridiculous amount of money getting spent for no return resulted in Eric Bischoff getting fired, and the future of the Kiss Demon was now in jeopardy, although I'd like to hope that was the least of everyone's concerns. Bryan Adams made one more appearance as the Kiss Demon, showing up on the next episode of Nitro after a Mike Enos and Evan Courageous match that also included a run-in by Vampiro. The Demon made it clear he was coming after Vampiro, but then Adams decided he didn't want to portray the character anymore. According to Dale Torborg, Bryan didn't want the gimmick in the first place and he felt pushed into it. But Dale, who had the MVP gimmick at this time, a gimmick inspired by the Warriors movie and the Baseball Furies, Dale actually wanted to play the role of the Kiss Demon, and keep in mind, he was the original first choice. He was a massive fan of the band, and he felt a certain amount of pride representing his favourite group, so that's all good. Unfortunately though, things didn't quite work out that way. Dale said he was approached by WCW executives about bringing the Demon back to TV after the character hadn't been seen in a few months, and he was flat out told that the Demon character was going to get buried specifically to make Eric Bischoff look bad. Bill Bush was calling the shots during this time period, and Dale was apparently told that he'd be doing WCW a massive favour by wearing the face paint. After the Demon run had ended and after WCW's obligations toward Kiss had also ended, Dale was promised a push with a new character. Dale would actually fight it. He wanted to keep the Kiss Demon going as long as possible, and he had no desire to help WCW bury Bischoff. Dale just wanted to be the Kiss Demon on TV. So, the New Year's Evil pay-per-view doesn't happen, there's not going to be a Kiss faction, Bischoff was gone, and it was time for the Demon to re-emerge on WCW Thunder. Dale came out on the 26th of January episode of Thunder to wrestle Terry Funk, and he was defeated in around 3 minutes. On the next episode of Nitro, Norman Smiley got locked inside the Demon's casket. He then re-emerged in full Kiss gear, and he went out to have a match against Shane Helms. The big, scary, badass Kiss Demon had to run to the cops, and he ordered the boys in blue to find out who stole his gear. And after Smiley defeated Helms, the Demon came down to ringside to get his gear back. Smiley ran away, and Nitro moved on. Later in the week, again on Thunder, Norman Smiley defeated the Demon, this time in under 2 minutes. The Demon didn't care about winning the match, he just wanted his gear back. So he spent the match ripping Norman's clothes off, only to get locked in a chicken wing and forced to submit. Think about all that WCW and KISS crossover merchandising. Think about the New Year's Eve pay-per-view featuring WCW in a KISS concert. Then take a look at the Demon getting his shit jacked by Norman Smiley and topping out on WCW Thunder. Even if you didn't follow the backstage happenings in professional wrestling and you watched WCW in the most casual way possible, you could still tell that something was up here. All the fanfare and build-up for KISS in 1999, and then in 2000, the Demon's getting completely wrecked on TV. It wasn't all bad though. The Demon did get a win over Bobby Eaton on WCW Saturday Night with this right here. Still, on Thunder and Nitro, things would progressively get worse while the matches got shorter. It took Billy Kidman around 2.5 minutes to defeat the Demon on the 7th of February 2000 episode of Nitro, and on the next episode of Thunder, the Demon got a shot at the hardcore title. It lasted about 5 seconds. The Demon came out of his casket, he got whacked with a kendo stick, and he got pinned immediately by Bam Bam Bigelow. WCW had to put the Demon on TV because they were contractually obligated to do so, and in WCW's infinite wisdom, they decided to bury the character to get at the former executive producer. WCW were still obligated to put the KISS Demon in that pay-per-view main event also, and that match would take place at Super Brawl 10. The match was billed as a special main event match, but it was 4th on the card. A total of 7 matches took place after the KISS Demon match, so you come to the conclusion that they were fucking around here while still technically honouring their agreement by billing the match as a main event. WCW expected fans to pay for these shows, and to completely bury a character and then put that character in a pay-per-view match really isn't the way to put fans first. They could have at least tried with the KISS Demon. They were stuck with the character after all. They could have tried to do something, but no, it all turns into petty bullshit and it's the fans who ultimately pay for it. You do feel bad for Dale too. Dale really wanted to do something with the character, as badly conceived as it was. But anyway, the Demon versus the Wall took place at Super Brawl and surprise surprise, nobody cared. It's absolute silence in the arena from bell to bell. The Wall wins with a chokeslam from the top rope, and WCW could now say they presented the Demon in a match billed as a main event. I have no idea if this was ever contested, by the way, and I don't care enough to find out either. You'd think that was it done and dusted, there was no further use for the character and WCW could put this all behind them. But remember, it was Dale who wanted to keep going as the KISS Demon. Funnily enough, Eric Bischoff was brought back to WCW as an on-screen character and co-writer along with Vince Russo, and maybe Bischoff still believed in the KISS Demon, who knows. But the Demon would stay with WCW right up until the very end of the company. Although the bar was already set incredibly low, things did improve for the Demon in terms of his role on TV. He started a feud with Vampiro, the guy who the original KISS Demon was supposed to begin his run with back in August of 1999, and the Demon was able to pin Vampiro on Nitro in the month of July. At Bash at the Beach 2000, the Demon had another match against Vampiro, a graveyard match. And you know something? This was actually pretty interesting and it could have been better if the lighting was turned up a little. Sometimes it's difficult to see what's going on, but the Demon, along with his new manager Asia, who would also become his real wife, go on a little Vampiro hunt in the graveyard and we have ourselves a fight. It's explained that the winner is the first person to get back to the arena, and Vampiro ends up winning this one. The Demon gets whacked with what looks like a piece of tombstone and he gets put in a casket. While this was going on, Vampiro screams for the Demon to join him and the Demon refuses. So he gets locked in the casket and Vampiro heads back to the arena. Inside the arena, Vampiro says the Demon is dead. Vampiro's gotten rid of Dale Torborg once and for all, along with another guy who Vampiro's had problems with recently, the man called Sting. But Vampiro ends up meeting a bunch of dudes wearing Sting masks and he himself ends up in a coffin. The Stinger wasn't finished with Vampiro just yet. The next night on Monday Nitro, Vampiro claimed the Demon's soul and the Demon became part of Vampiro's Dark Carnival. They were then attacked by Sting wearing a ski mask, but nonetheless, the Demon now had something he could properly sink his teeth into. Turning heel wasn't a bad idea at all at this point. The Demon joined forces with Vampiro and the ICP. Soon they were joined by the Great Muta, but let's not get ahead of ourselves either here. The Dark Carnival was another somewhat decent idea in WCW that suffered due to inconsistent booking. That's going to do it for this one, not much more I can say really. The Kiss Demon, in my opinion, was a bad idea from the start, and it's really difficult to imagine this idea ever having any positive outcomes. Even a die-hard Kiss fan who watches wrestling on a regular basis wouldn't have been very excited for this thanks to WCW's track record at the time. Kiss as a band still has a good following today, but a band who was more popular in the 70s and 80s wasn't the answer to WCW's problems towards the very end of the 90s, let alone a character based off the same band. Much respect to Dale Torborg though, who loved his time as the character, and much respect for Dale fighting for what he believed in. But in the end, as predicted, it's a colossal waste of money on an idea that was never gonna work anyway. In terms of merchandising and profiting off the Kiss and WCW relationship, no merchandise was ever created. I found this shirt online that was shared by a collector, and apparently this shirt was handed out for free at the Las Vegas Nitro, but there was nothing else, not even a WCW produced action figure. Dale said there was no merch for the Demon because WCW didn't want to pay Kiss any more than what they already had, rendering the whole reason for the relationship beginning in the first place completely fucking pointless. Dale would bring the Demon back at Impact's Bound for Glory show in 2021, and it looked like a lot of fans got a kick out of seeing the ill-fated character once again. It also looks like Dale had fun too, so all's well that ends well. Anyway, thanks for watching this one, and take care. Going back and watching Hulk Hogan's pre-NWO days in WCW is really fascinating to me. Hulkamania was synonymous with the World Wrestling Federation throughout the 80s and early 90s, and the WWF's main event scene was built around Hogan during a period of significant company growth. For many, Hulk Hogan joining WCW and wrestling for what many diehards saw as the enemy was both shocking yet very intriguing. While Hogan was dominating the WWF with similar larger-than-life superstars, WCW fought to maintain a sense of tradition. It didn't always work out that way because there were people in charge who wanted WCW to become more WWF-esque, but the purest of WCW fans generally enjoyed a no-nonsense wrestling show without cartoony and over-the-top characters. For many NWA and WCW fans, the WWF was seen as a company that presented kiddie wrestling shows, and, you know, to a certain extent, those WCW fans were right. We shouldn't overlook the fact that WCW's biggest babyface at the time wore colourful tights, had his face painted and referred to his fans as the Little Stingers, but still, generally speaking, the WWF did seem to specifically target the young demographic, while WCW would put on matches that an older audience would maybe appreciate too. Both companies had success, but it was Hulk Hogan who helped launch the WWF into orbit with his matches against the likes of Andre the Giant, Randy Savage and the Ultimate Warrior. And through this whole lucrative WWF run, Hulk Hogan's character didn't change. Throughout it all, he wore the yellow and red. He was the real American who fights for the right of every man. The idea here was, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, and indeed, for the longest time, Hulkamania wasn't broke. The news that Hogan signed with WCW in 1994 sent shockwaves throughout the wrestling world, and it became one of the biggest stories of the year. But those traditional WCW fans who didn't care all that much for New York wrestling weren't sold on the idea. And seeing as Hogan and WCW still thought that Hulkamania wasn't broke, Hogan would enter the company still talking about taking your vitamins and saying your prayers while decked out in the classic yellow and red gear. WCW fans were just getting the big WWF guy, and what's maybe worse, he was booked to destroy WCW legend Ric Flair in his first match while capturing the WCW Heavyweight Championship. Let's not exaggerate things either though. If you watch Bash at the Beach 1994 from Orlando, Florida, you'll see an audience who were jumping for joy when Hogan defeated Flair, and the crowd celebrated alongside Hogan after the final bell. But the most vocal of WCW fans, the ones who were there for years, the ones who bought the After magazines and collected the tapes, they weren't sold on Hogan. And when Hulk Hogan was booked to wrestle in Atlanta or the Carolinas, that vocal minority became the vocal majority. Showing their inability to read the crowd and predict where things were going, WCW doubled down with the creation of the Three Faces of Fear and then the Dungeon of Doom, a group of villainous bastards who arguably were more cartoony and ridiculous than the villains the WWF presented on their TV shows. The Dungeon of Doom were specifically put together to feud against Hulk Hogan. Their mission was to end Hulkamania once and for all, and some of the promos and pre-tapes that aired during this time period would become infamous because they really were that bad.
There's no Hulkamaniacs here!
Hogan would maintain rivalries with the Dungeon of Doom and the Four Horsemen during the early days of WCW Nitro, and the reactions Hogan received on live TV were getting more and more negative as time went on. You can understand fans cheering for Flair and the Horsemen in the Carolinas, but when fans started cheering for Kevin Sullivan over Hulk Hogan on episodes of Nitro, then you know things were starting to get bad. I must reiterate though, there were fans who still cheered for Hogan, but it was a far cry from Hogan's heyday and even a far cry from Bash at the Beach 1994. The boos seemed to catch Hogan off guard sometimes, and it's unclear if it was Hogan or Bischoff who came up with the idea for Hulkamania to turn to the dark side for a little while, and it's unclear if the experiment was going to lead to something more substantial, but I do believe that the fans' negative reaction towards Hogan drove him to do something different with the character. The thing is, the evil dark side Hulk Hogan felt like more cartoony nonsense, and nobody bought into it. It confused fans more than anything else, and it came across as so bizarre that it actually became funny. Let's take a look at how it all went down. This is WCW Blunder, Darkside Hulk Hogan. So we've established Hogan's main enemies in WCW, the Horsemen and the Dungeon of Doom. Hulk had some friends though, mainly Sting and the Macho Man Randy Savage. At Fall Brawl 1995, Hogan, Sting, Macho and Lex Luger took on the Dungeon of Doom consisting of the Shark, the Zodiac, Kamala and Ming. If Hogan's team won, he'd get 5 minutes all alone with Kevin Sullivan inside the cage, but during those 5 minutes, the Giant came out and he attacked Hulk Hogan, snapping his neck in the process. The pay-per-view ended with Hulk's teammates surrounding him looking very concerned and calling for help. 2 weeks later on Monday Nitro, Hogan appeared in a pre-taped interview wearing a neck brace, and he says he'll be ready to go again soon. He challenges Giant here to the infamous Monster Truck sumo match at Halloween Havoc, but not only that, Hulk grants the Giant a title shot at the pay-per-view if he can survive the chaos of the Monster Truck match. Hogan was wearing his black crosshair along with his usual gold cross, and he says once he beats the Giant and, quote, lays him down to rest next to his father, in reference to Andre the Giant. Remember, WCW tried to say the Giant was Andre's son, but yeah. Once Hogan lays the Giant to rest next to Andre, Hulk says the dark cloud that's hanging over his head will pass him by. Hogan removes the black cross while saying this line. To be honest, you really wouldn't think anything was going to come of this. It's just another Hogan promo filled with Hoganisms, for lack of a better term. But then, the next week on Nitro, Hulk lost his superpowers when he got his mustache shaved off. You guys who watch Reliving the War may remember all this, but it's worth a second look for sure. It's just so ridiculous. Hulk goes to the ring for an interview with Mean Gene, still wearing the neck brace. Hogan says he spent time with a little Hulkamaniac who was getting ready for a lung transplant, and the kid ordered Hogan to take on the Giant. Hogan plans on finishing the job before Halloween Havoc, so he announces he's gonna go look for the Giant right here on Nitro. Hulk leaves the ring, he's giving fans high fives in the front row, but then this old lady right here throws powder in Hogan's face, the dastardly old bitch. The granny starts hitting Hogan with her walking stick as the Giant and the Zodiac make their way to the ring. We learned that the old lady was actually Kevin Sullivan, and the Giant snaps Hogan's neck one more time. Surely Hulk's head would have fallen off with all this neck abuse, but wait, there's more. Kevin Sullivan shaves off Hogan's mustache in the middle of the ring, an act that shocks Eric Bischoff on commentary, but it makes Bobby Heenan and the fans at home laugh their asses off. The American males and the Nasty Boys try to put a stop to this, but they're no match for the Giant and the Zodiac. Hogan's been embarrassed on live TV. How would he respond to this next week on Nitro? Well, he would wear all black and he would embrace his dark side. It's almost like the mustache kept Hogan on the straight and narrow. Hulk didn't appear on the next episode of Saturday Night. The Giant and Sullivan cut a promo instead where the big man said Hogan's going down at Halloween Havoc. Pretty standard stuff. On the next episode of Nitro, however, a clean-shaven Hulk Hogan walked out in the black gear, and he better explain himself here because this is just crazy. Hulk says he's dressed like this because he now understands the rules of the game and it's time to take care of business. That's it, there's no further explanation. The crowd boos as Hogan says he defeated Andre the Giant in the Silverdome and he plans on doing the same to his son at Halloween Havoc. Hulk again wants to get things started early on Nitro, but Mean Gene lets him know that the Giant has been barred from the show, so there goes that idea. Hogan then says he wants to give us a Hulkamania history lesson, can't wait. He says back in New York when Hulkamania was running wild, the promoter's ego, Vince McMahon's ego, got bigger than the wrestling business itself. Hulk was looking for a place where Hulkamania could grow, so he took his little Hulkamaniacs with him to WCW. I'm not kidding, by the way, this is what he said. Hogan goes on to say Sullivan and the Giant are burning down the trees in the forest, but Hogan's here to plant the seeds again. Hogan compares Sullivan shaving his mustache to someone graffitiing the Washington Monument or burning the American flag. Again, I'm not kidding. And then the Dungeon of Doom drive up to the arena in their monster truck and security stops them from going any further. I mean, you're in a fucking monster truck, lads. Floor it and don't look back. Hogan then leaves the arena to go find that monster truck and Nitro moves on to its main event. So, in short, Hogan said he understands the rules of the game and that's why he's dressed in black. He's fighting fire with fire, it seems. People try to say this was a heel turn and people use it as a kinda gotcha moment when talking about Hogan's real heel turn at Bash at the Beach 1996, trying to say Hogan turned bad a year before the NWO even existed, but that's just wrong. Hogan was still fighting for his little Hulkamaniacs here, he was still feuding with the Dungeon of Doom, he maybe talked a little more aggressively maybe, but it's still Hulk Hogan trying to be a do-gooder when nobody really cared. This was not a heel turn, maybe it was a small test or experiment, but it wasn't a heel turn. Darkside evil Hulk Hogan then recorded two pre-taped promos, one for WCW Saturday Night and one for Nitro. The Saturday Night promo ended the show, and while American Made played in the background, Hogan explained that everything Sullivan said about the evil in Hulk Hogan is true, brothers, but he's using his dark side to protect the training, the prayers, and the vitamins. Hogan says that this side of the Hulkster's been hiding, but it's come out so Hulk can play the Dungeon of Doom's game. If he doesn't do this, then the training, prayers, and vitamins could be left in the hands of the Giant. Hulk then compares the shaving of his legendary mustache to Kevin Sullivan slapping every little Hulkamaniac across the face, and he then says it makes him remember all the little Hulkamaniacs who are no longer with us, those who died of illnesses. Hulk says it makes him want to take all those diseases and eat them alive. Yeah, he bangs on about taking out the Giant at Halloween Havoc, and he wraps it up by saying, "What you gonna do when the shadow of Hulkamania covers you?" Moving on to Nitro, Hogan's now calling the Hulkamaniacs the Manioids, yeah. But the message is the exact same. Hogan's gonna protect his 3 demandments. He's talking about putting the Giant down just like Andre the Giant back at WrestleMania 3. And Jimmy Hart gets nervous. He's afraid of what Darkside Hogan is gonna do to his enemies. Hulk says, "Fear not, little Jimmy, this needs to be done." On the next episode of Saturday Night, the Master and the Taskmaster say they have a surprise for Hogan at Halloween Havoc. They've only gone to the Himalayas and found themselves a Yeti, who we'll call the Yeti from this point forward. I covered the Yeti previously on the channel, so I won't go into detail here, but just when you think this fuck couldn't get any more clustered, it definitely does. Hogan appears in another pre-tape and he says all the gyms have closed from Venice Beach to Tampa because owners are afraid Hogan's gonna bend and wreck their equipment. Hogan says he's gonna appear on Nitro, he's got a surprise that'll make Sullivan and that big stinky Giant shake in their boots, and Hulk says he's gonna be the most evil person in the building when Nitro comes live from Huntsville, Alabama. He then says when he disposes of the Giant, Hogan's gonna have to dispose of his black gloves and his black bandana. He's also gonna dispose of his dark side, meaning Hogan's probably gonna go back to the red and yellow once he defeats his opponent at Halloween Havoc. So we get to the Nitro before Halloween Havoc, and Hogan cuts a promo here that some of you may remember. He makes reference to the O.J. Simpson trial by saying everyone knows what a man wearing a pair of black gloves and a black rag on his head is capable of. That's not very wholesome there, Mr. Hogan. And Hulk also says he might just keep the black gear after defeating the Giant later in the week. Hogan carries the little Hulkamaniacs on his back as he continues running wild in WCW. Hogan isn't going to lick his wounds anymore though. Hulk's going to get himself a Harley and drag the Giant around until he's no more, and that'll be the end of Andre's son. In regards to Hogan's friends not caring much about this Darkside business, Hogan surprisingly calls out Sting for wearing red and yellow and trying to grow a Fu Manchu, and Hogan calls the Stinger, the Macho Man and Lex Luger little puppies who can all line up to take a shot at Hogan. Hogan seems to be disregarding his babyface friends here and letting them all know he's not their ally anymore. You can completely forget about that though, as Hulk comes out at the end of Nitro to help Randy Savage. He magically no longer needs the neck brace either. Hogan tries to do some damage to the Giant, but the big man no-sells everything and Hulk goes down after a clubbing blow to the back. Hogan hulks up, and then the Dungeon of Doom hit the ring. Macho and Hulk fight the Doomers off, and the only thing that can stop Hulk Hogan is head of security Doug Dillinger. Nitro then ends by showing fans the Yeti breaking out of a block of ice, and yep, way to sell a pay-per-view guys, good job. Halloween Havoc 95's been done to death here on YouTube, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, but we need to take a quick look in order to understand what happens next with Darkside Super Evil Hulk Hogan. Hogan wins the Monster Truck Sumo match, but Giant apparently falls to his death afterwards. This match took place on top of Cobo Hall, and yeah, you know the story. But what's interesting here is that the evil, no-good Hulk Hogan actually shows remorse, and he asks for help after Giant takes the plunge. Hogan appears at the end of the show for the main event, and he says there was a terrible accident that happened earlier on, meaning the main event isn't going to happen. But then the Giant just walks down the ramp, and Hogan's reaction says it all really. Schiavone says the Giant is risen from the dead as the challenger steps in the ring, and then the main event goes ahead as planned. Hogan's replaced his mustache with Taskmaster's eyebrows and lightning bolts, and the match plays out like a typical Hulk Hogan bout. He doesn't work heel or anything like that. Turns out Jimmy Hart out-eviled Hulk Hogan when he turns on Hulkamania to join the Dungeon of Doom. Hogan gets his ass kicked, he loses the WCW Championship, and then the Yeti comes out to hump Hogan. A dark cloud over Hulkamania indeed. So Hogan didn't defeat the Giant, and therefore evil Hulk Hogan would stay with us for another little while. Hogan didn't appear on the next episode of Nitro, but on the 6th of November episode we learned that Randy Savage had joined Hulk on the dark side. Hulk and Savage sit on a bench in Venice Beach along with a random dude who looks completely wasted, and Hulk says he's glad his buddy Randy has joined him on his evil conquest. The Dungeon of Doom are still the targets, but Hogan isn't sure who he can trust anymore. The black do-rag has clearly started affecting his brain and he's getting all paranoid. Randy says don't even sweat it, the Macho Man will go back to the light side on Nitro and he'll find out who the friends are and who the foes are of Darkside Hogan. As for this guy, I have no fucking idea. In the arena, the Dungeon of Doom learned that the World Championship's going to get stripped from the Giant due to the dubious nature of his title win at Halloween Havoc, and whoever wins the World War III Battle Royal will become the new champion. On the following episode of Nitro, the 13th of November episode, that's when the wheels came off, that's when all control was lost, and that's when the drugs kicked in, because there's just no way to make sense of what fans were treated to next. Hulk Hogan, wearing a mask and a dark hooded cloak, carrying a fucking sword, talking absolute unfiltered bollocks for a solid 2 minutes. It starts like this. Hogan says the Dungeon of Doom shake in fear because Hulk Hogan walks around with the power of the training, the prayers and the vitamins. Every creature that breathes Dungeon of Doom is afraid of Hulkamania because the 3 demandments of Hulk Hogan are immortal. Hogan says the brother Randy Savage is on a mission tonight. He's going to deliver Ming's head on a silver platter later on Nitro. Ming's on the destruction hit list of Hulkamania, and Hogan hopes the Hulkamaniacs are with Randy as he walks on the light side. Evil, batshit crazy Hogan says he doesn't know if Sting's on the dark side or the light side of Hulkamania. Yeah, it's getting confusing. Hogan doesn't know if Sting's friend or foe, so Hogan promises to look at Sting, quote, somewhere in the eye, and see where he's coming from. If Sting's on the Dungeon of Doom side, then Sting's going to get moved to the top of the hit list. The thing is, Sting didn't hint at being a Doomer at all during this time period. He had a troubled friendship with Lex Luger, and Luger was also friendly with the Dungeon of Doom, but not once did Sting ever so much as hint at being a member of the ill-fated faction. Anyway, Hogan tells Macho to bring him Ming's head on a silver platter, and he says, "What you gonna do when the Macho Man and Hulk Hogan take the darkness of the Doom and turn it to destroy you?" Wouldn't really work on a t-shirt, that one, would it? Savage defeated Ming, but the Doomers and Lex Luger hit the ring before Randy could cut his opponent's head off. And at the end of Nitro, Mean Gene informs Sting that Hogan wants him one-on-one next week on Nitro. Sting says he never thought he'd see the day when Hogan came knocking on his door looking for a fight, but here we are. Sting can let it slide when Hogan talks shit about him before Halloween Havoc by calling him a little puppy, but Hogan needs to realise that around these neck of the woods in WCW, Sting's a big dog. Sting's been through it all in World Championship Wrestling and he's got a pretty long list of victories. Sting won't run away, he's actually looking forward to fighting Hogan next week. Our adventure ends then on the following episode of Nitro, Sting vs Hogan, the 20th of November 1995. This is the closest we get to a heel Hulk Hogan during this short run. It's one thing to go up against the irredeemable Dungeon of Doom, it's another thing to go up against Sting, WCW's most beloved superstar. The fans go nuts for Sting as he wears the red and yellow once again. When Macho Man and Hulk Hogan come up with a plan to catch Sting off guard, the crowd boos. These fans definitely wanted Sting to win here tonight, and throughout the match they continued cheering for the icon. This match actually wasn't all that bad, and it's never really brought up either. It ends with Hogan breaking the Scorpion Deathlock and putting Sting down with a big boot. He goes for the leg drop, Sting dodges it, and Hulk finds himself in the Deathlock again, screaming that Sting's gonna break his leg. The good times end though with the Dungeon of Doom coming down to attack both men. Sting, Hulk, and Randy Savage work together to clear the ring, and Nitro ends with Hogan and Sting taking out the Giant with a chair. World War III happened later in the week, and the show started off with Hogan getting rid of the black gear. Hogan said the Hulkamaniac stuck with him on his walk to the Darkside, but he didn't take the final step. Hogan knows who his friends are, he'll never question Sting again. The boys are back in town, and Hogan won't be turning evil again anytime soon. 8 months later, he joined the NWO, and his biggest rival would turn out to be Sting. I'm sure a lot of this can be explained. The shaving of the mustache in Hogan's series of pre-tapes were likely due to Hogan filming a movie, and I'm sure in his head Hogan thought the Darkside stuff was a good idea. Again, maybe to test the waters, maybe to see if it got him a more favourable crowd response. I'm sure it wasn't supposed to come across as bad as it did, but man, some of this stuff was absolute prime WCW Blunder material. As it would turn out, Hogan turning heel would actually be the best thing he could ever do, as evidenced by the New World Order, but it does go to show that things need to be done the right way. Turning heel can be great if it's handled properly. If you're going to show up with a mask and swinging a big sword about the place though, fans might not buy into it. Nothing was ever going to advance or change during this Dungeon of Doom stuff either. It was as one-dimensional as it comes, with Hogan taking on a bunch of unsavoury villains, and trying to deviate away from that evidently would give comical results. It would take a bit more for fans to buy into Hulk Hogan turning to the dark side, and thankfully, that's what happened when Scott Hall and Kevin Nash showed up on Nitro a few months down the road. Thanks for watching this one, guys, and take care. Cage matches have been part of wrestling for a long time, and there's been loads of different cage variations used throughout different promotions. The Big Blue Cage in the World Wrestling Federation, the War Games Double Cage in Jim Crockett Promotions and WCW, the Hell in a Cell, the WCW Triple Cage, the Punjabi Prison, the Thunderdome, Elimination Chamber, the list goes on. All these cages have something in common though. They surround the ring, or they at least let the competitors utilise the ring ropes, one of the most important things of any functional wrestling ring. Now, there have been cages used in wrestling that didn't include ring ropes, the Lion's Den for example, but the Lion's Den worked because it was built for Ken Shamrock and his MMA history, plus it was usually placed away from the ring in its own separate location. The WCW Asylum cage, however, was not put in a separate location. Oh no. This giant bird cage was placed right in the middle of the ring, limiting the amount of available space considerably, while also taking away those ring ropes. And this birdcage wasn't developed for a legit cage fighter, it was developed for Scotty Steiner. Confused? Yeah, I wish I could say everything will get cleared up by the end of this video, but you're probably going to leave this one even more confused as you think to yourself, what was the point of all that? But let's see how it all played out on TV. This is WCW Blunder, the Asylum cage matches. Big Bad Booty Daddy Scotty Big Papa Pump Freakzilla Steiner was one of the more entertaining aspects of late WCW because the guy's filter was seemingly broke and he'd say pretty much anything that was on his mind while on TV. That little bit of thought processing that goes on before you speak, Scott Steiner didn't have that. And what we'd hear from Steiner on TV sometimes was nothing short of absolute gold, even if it didn't make a whole lot of sense. With his freaks, his peaks, and his fucking tagger, Scotty Steiner's character evolution was truly something to behold, even if some fans did miss the old Steiner of the late 80s to mid 90s. 2000 though would be the year when Scotty Steiner finally won the World Heavyweight Championship. Some would say it is too little too late, but it does show us that Russo had no issues pushing Scott and placing him right at the top of the cards. The Asylum cage matches though took place before Scott won the world title, and in typical WCW fashion, it wasn't really explained why Scott Steiner needed his own speciality match, or why the cage was even necessary in terms of storyline. In fairness, the cage looked different and the visual itself was pretty good, not gonna lie, and I'm all for Scotty Steiner getting his own match type because why not? The blunder in today's episode isn't necessarily the idea of the Asylum cage, but rather the comically bad matches that took place inside the Asylum and how those matches were booked. I do wish there was an interesting story about the creation of this match type with quotes from Russo and Steiner, but there's nothing out there really. Even doing a search on the Asylum match type leads us right to TNA, where they too had their own version of the cage match, although the only similarity is the name. So we're just going to watch the matches, talk about what happens, and ponder over the business decision to hold these matches on TV when the WWF were destroying WCW in the television ratings. May 22nd, 2000, WCW Nitro comes from Grand Rapids, Michigan, Scotty Steiner's home state. We find even more blunder material on this episode of Nitro as Vince Russo holds a funeral service for Ric Flair's career, but we'll cover all this nonsense on Reliving the War in like 3 years' time. Can't wait. Anyway, Scotty Steiner comes to the ring and he says it's good to be home. Right here in Michigan is where Big Papa Pump first took his freaks to ecstasy, apparently, and he says this.
And all my freaks know there's nothing finer than doing the 69er with Scott Steiner.
Scott continues on by saying his friends have warned him he'll end up in jail if he doesn't straighten himself out. Steiner says he's been in the cell and he's been through hell, completely contradicting the last sentence, but anyway, he says he's always survived whatever's thrown at him, and from now on, wherever Steiner goes, the cell comes with him. I know, don't try to make sense of it. Steiner directs our attention to the ceiling and we see the Asylum. Tony Schiavone acts all surprised, even though the cage was blatantly shown multiple times during Nitro's opening sequence, but yeah. Scotty says it's easy to get into the Asylum, but in order to get out, you must say, I quit. Okay, so it's a submission-only cage match. Got it. The only way out is to give up. There's two dudes that Scott wants to get inside the Asylum, his brother Rick and Tank Abbott. The genetic freak invites both guys to come to the ring, but only Rick comes down. So we assume it's a one-on-one Asylum cage match between the Steiner brothers. Schiavone starts confusing viewers when he says there's no way out of this cage, even though Scott just said you can give up to get out, but let's see what happens here. The two start fighting before the cage lowers. The Asylum then slowly comes down and it surrounds both men, and it made me think, you know what I would have done here? I would have quickly ran out of the ring, let Scotty get locked inside the birdcage, throw some shit at him from the outside and then steal his freaks, but Rick wasn't thinking about any of those things, unfortunately. The competitors have lost the use of the ring ropes, and you can see the mesh has a lot of give. It isn't the tightest of cage structures and it looks a little, I don't know, cheap. Scott realizes he hasn't got much room when he tries a suplex and it looks absolutely shit. So he tries an overhead belly to belly right beside the cage and it looks a little better. Before you know it, Scott locks in the Steiner recliner, but then Goldberg's music begins playing in the arena. We don't get Goldberg, we get Tankberg. What a genius play on words. He's holding a pair of bolt cutters too, but what Tank forgot is that there's no way into the Asylum and there's no way out. Those bolt cutters, fucking useless. Tank gives it 2 snips before giving up. So he punches Mickey J, he takes the controller away from the referee, and he pushes a big old button to make the cage disappear. Remember guys, the only way it ends is via submission. After a devastating, historic 3.5 minutes of absolutely fuck all, the first Asylum match ends in a no contest. Tank Abbott attacks Scotty Steiner, Kevin Nash comes down to help out Scott, and Vince Russo watches all this in the back while telling Jeff Jarrett, "It's such good shit, pal." So match number 1 was awful. It consisted of, 2 suplexes, a few bumps on the springy cage, and a Steiner recliner. Steiner promised there was only one way out of his own personal cell of torment, and that was by giving up. But he totally forgot that the dude that controlled the cage was referee Mickey J, and Mickey J is no prison guard either. Surely WCW would take this idea, rethink their strategy, spend a little time to actually plan out a proper match, and build up the next Asylum match as something special. Absolutely not. The next match took place the following week and it was a whole 1 minute shorter than the first match. 2.5 minutes of Asylum action, that should make those pesky viewers switch over from WWF Raw, shouldn't it? Just for shits and giggles, I checked out what happened over on Raw on the 29th of May, the date of the second Asylum match. The WWF scheduled a Rock vs Undertaker main event, although it actually didn't happen to be fair. There was also a European title match between Kurt Angle and Eddie Guerrero, and we also had Bill Buchanan taking on Steve Blackman. It wasn't a shit hot episode of Raw, but it still would have kept viewers hooked in. Nitro, on the other hand, with its 20 matches, promos and pre-tapes on this one night, was such a mess with their Jeff Jarrett vs Ric Flair main event, footage of DDP getting kicked out of his own house by his lovely wife Kimberly, and of course our second Asylum cage match. Big Papa Pump comes out and he says he's a genetic freak in heat, and tonight he's gonna do something special for all the ladies in Salt Lake City. He's gonna give them all a chance to get on the big bad booty daddy. They only have to do one thing.
And all you gotta do is separate your hips and put your ass out, and the daddy will make you pass out.
Alright, seems straightforward enough. Steiner announces he's gonna take on Tank Abbott at the Great American Bash, and that match takes place inside the Asylum. But tonight, Shane Douglas is gonna face Freakzilla inside the most unforgiving structure in the history of pro wrestling. Shane wasn't too eager to get inside the Asylum, but Vince Russo buttered Douglas up by putting Scotty Steiner's US title on the line in this very match. Now, even though this Asylum match was way shorter, it was still much better than the first encounter because both guys actually tried to wrestle in there, but it's still not what anyone would consider a good match. It's over painfully quick, it doesn't really get started, and because Shane and Scott actually try a few different moves, the limited space really gets highlighted. I mean, just look at this. I really can't see why anyone thought this would be a good idea, and I'd say it was probably a pain in the ass setting that cage up and raising it above the ring before the show went live. It's a lot of effort for 2.5 minutes of TV time, but there's really no point questioning these things either. WCW around this time period was just completely insane. Anyway, Scotty gets the win with his Steiner recliner. Take a look at referee Slick Johnson calling for the bell. Ring the bell, ring the bell, you stop, ring the bell, it's over, ring that bell again. Scott, let go, please don't hurt me. There's an episode of Nitro just before the Great American Bash, but unfortunately, or fortunately, there was no Asylum action in Atlanta, Georgia. A different kind of cage hangs above the ring tonight. It's WCW's take on the Hell in a Cell. This would get used twice on this evening, and not only did this cage hang above the ring, but also there was a big old bag of, quote, red liquid that would drench Nature Boy Ric Flair. No room for stupid Asylum cages when there's Nature Boys that need embarrassed on TV, guys, come on. On this evening, Scott had a pretty good match with Vampiro that, while entertaining, also included a ton of WCW nonsense as expected. Vampiro was getting ready for his Human Torch match against Sting at the pay-per-view, so he comes to Nitro with gasoline and a blowtorch, wanting to make Freakzilla a little crispy tonight. It doesn't take long for the match to spill to the outside, where Scotty does some serious damage, using chairs and slamming Vampiro on the announce table, but back inside the ring, Vampiro's able to take Steiner out by whacking him with his trusty blowtorch. Medeja hits Vampiro with a crossbody and the crowd loved this, by the way, but then Vampiro stalked Medeja back up the entranceway while holding the blowtorch and gasoline. The Stinger comes to the rescue, Vampiro gets forced back in the ring, and Scotty wins with the Steiner recliner once again. It doesn't sound good, but against everything else WCW put on Nitro on this evening, it comes off as a 5-star classic. Tank Abbott, meanwhile, took a loss to Bill Goldberg in the next matchup. You may wonder why I'm talking about these matches and not skipping straight onto the last Asylum match. Well, honestly, I wanted to cleanse myself a little and talk about something different. I've watched around 6 minutes total of Asylum match madness and already I don't want to watch anymore. There had to be something remotely interesting to look at in this video, so here's Ric Flair taking the blood bath again. Sorry, the red liquid bath again. Alright, let's do it. Great American Bash, a cornerstone of WCW dating back to Jim Crockett Promotions. An event that has a history filled with tradition, memorable moments, and unbelievable awe-inspiring matchups. And then we've got Scotty Steiner's big fucking birdcage. Tanky Boy Abbott better bring his A game to the Great American Bash because, technically speaking, Big Papa Pump's undefeated inside the Asylum. He's spent an extremely long time inside the birdcage and the match has now become his speciality. My god. There's no Scotty Steiner promo before the match, so already this one loses points. Tank Abbott makes his entrance first, out comes Scott with his freaks and his peaks. The big bad booty daddy lets his valets know he's gonna make this one as quick and painless as possible, and the match begins again before the cage has fully surrounded the competitors. Almost instantly, an announcement gets made. The ring announcer gives viewers some information from Eric Bischoff and Vince Russo, and I quote, "Since the Asylum is Scott Steiner's signature match, in an effort to establish an even playing field, Rick Steiner has been added to the match, making this a 2-on-1 handicap match." Signature match, that's hilarious. Rick Steiner comes down to join in on the fun, and I swear to god, it's remarkable how little happens in this bout. Scott stays on the mat while Rick and Tank wait for the cage to fully lower. The two kick Scott a few times while he's down. Scott then gets launched into the birdcage. He gets kicked again. He gets launched into the birdcage again. He gets kicked again. He gets launched into the birdcage again. Oh, he gets kicked again. Really, here's something different, an elbow to the groin. And then he gets kicked again, and it's time for the finish. Holy shit. Wank Abbott pulls a chain out of his crotch and Rick tells Tank he doesn't need to do that. Rick showing a bit of mercy here it seems for his brother, so Tank ends up smacking the dog-faced gremlin with the chain, and this, of course, gives Scotty a chance to punch Tank in the balls, smack him with his own chain, and then lock in the Steiner recliner. That's the match over, 3.5 minutes again of absolutely nothing, and it's no wonder the match type got scrapped after this bout. At least they had the sense to call it quits. It's baffling how they thought putting another guy in there was a good idea, seeing the ring space was already severely limited. No more Asylum matches in WCW though, thankfully, and Scotty went on to bigger and better things. Alright, so I'm sure some of you guys may have thought this actually wasn't all that bad and you'll want to put forward your comments and statements about why this was actually good, or at least passable. I hear you, and hopefully I can address some of those comments now that I pretty much expect after putting this video together. First of all, some may say it made sense for Asylum matches to end quickly because in a real cage fight, one wouldn't expect a fighter to last all that long anyway. Two things there, this isn't a real cage fight, and I hope I don't sound like a dick when I say that either, but when you buy a ticket to a pro wrestling show or you switch the channel to watch a pro wrestling show, you kinda expect to see pro wrestling and not MMA cage fighting. The guys in the cage wrestled, at least they tried to wrestle. They didn't pretend to throw stiff shots or try to make things look like an MMA fight, so that argument doesn't really work. Secondly, I don't even think WCW were thinking about how a real cage fight would play out by limiting the time, because Nitro matches during this era were incredibly short anyway. Take for example the night of the first Asylum cage match. That match went 3.5 minutes. The match before that, Mike Awesome vs. The Wall, went for 1 minute and 25 seconds. The match after, Chuck Palumbo vs. DDP, was 3 minutes. Some of you might say that the cage actually looked different, and at least WCW were trying something new, and I would completely agree with you there. We joked about bird cages and all that stuff, but it was something we hadn't seen before, and it looked pretty unique during arena shots, so I'm with you on that one. The visual worked. Some of you may think this was all really done for Tank Abbott with his MMA history, and it wasn't really built around Scott Steiner in the first place. Yeah, you probably could say that, but Tank also lost his first and only Asylum match, so I'm not sure how it benefited him in any way. Finally, some may say to me to stop being such a picky bastard and just have fun with it. It's only a cage in the ring, for fuck's sake, and, you know, I try my best to have fun watching pro wrestling, and even when things are bad, I can still have a laugh. Really, this whole Blunder series is all about laughing at some of the more silly things WCW put on TV, but Asylum cage matches simply were not fun to watch. The most fun I had putting this video together was when Scotty Steiner had a microphone in his hand, and I really mean that. It's incredible how these matches are so short, yet you still want to skip over them or move on to the next segment. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that there were no plans made for how the bouts would actually play out. There's guys out there who would look at this monstrosity and still think of a few creative spots they could do inside, outside, or even on top of the cage. There has to be something there. But it seems like the plan was, yeah, do whatever you can, just end it with a Steiner recliner and that'll do nicely, bro. I really do hope and I really do like to believe that it was Scotty Steiner who put the kibosh on these matches. I can just imagine Scott threatening to shove a baseball bat up Russo's ass if he books another Asylum match ever again as long as he lives. Still, I guess all's well that ends well. Steiner did end up winning the world belt towards the end of the year, and the Asylum cage was turned into scrap metal, so it worked out fine. Quite a while back, we took a look at RoboCop and WCW in a video that wasn't part of the Blunder series, but it really should have been. Old Alex Murphy showing up to help out the Stinger on a WCW pay-per-view event was definitely a sight to behold, but you know, RoboCop was still a pretty cool franchise, and while it was weird seeing these two completely different worlds cross over, there still would have been younger viewers out there who would have thought RoboCop showing up in WCW was pretty awesome. RoboCop still had some sort of relevancy in 1990 with the second movie coming out and all that stuff. WCW, in their infinite wisdom, decided to do it again the following year, but they went backwards this time. In 1991, they introduced a character from a movie released in 1939, and that movie was based on a book written in 1900. I'm of course talking about Oz, not the Wizard of Oz, just Oz. He had a wizard bring him down to the ring. The obvious question is why? Why on earth did anyone think it was a good idea to put a monster like Kevin Nash in one of the most ridiculous entrance attires in the history of wrestling and have him portray a character based on the fucking Wizard of Oz? Let's have a look in today's episode of WCW Blunder. In March 1986, Ted Turner made a big announcement. He was going to buy the MGM film studio for a massive $1.5 billion. The purchase landed Turner in a whole lot of debt, and just 3 months later, he sold many assets back to Kirk Kerkorian, the same person who Turner initially bought the MGM film studios from. Turner was ridiculed for the purchase by other entrepreneurs in the entertainment field. He ended up only getting around half his money back, but all along, Ted had a plan. You see, Ted held on to something from the purchase that could potentially earn him a lot of money in the long run, and that's the MGM movie catalogue and the cartoon catalogue. Movies that Turner now owned included timeless classics like 2001: A Space Odyssey, Singing in the Rain, Gone with the Wind, and The Wizard of Oz. He also now owned the Looney Tunes and Merry Melodies cartoon series and the Popeye cartoons, so he had quite a lot of content along with his own network to distribute that content. In 1988, Turner Network Television, TNT, made its debut, and that channel began with an airing of Gone with the Wind, and the cartoon catalogue would act as the foundation for Cartoon Network. TCM, Turner Classic Movies, would debut in 1994, and TCM would air classic MGM and pre-1950 Warner Brothers movies. So effectively, Ted's purchase of MGM created 3 incredibly successful channels. In the end, that initial loss that Turner took wasn't so bad after all. They say Ted was a visionary, once a king in the land of broadcast media. It's hard to know if his plan all along was to take a loss and recoup the funds, but it all paid off, of course. Turner Entertainment had been established. It was rumoured that Ted Turner himself wanted to see something done with the Wizard of Oz on his WCW shows, and I'm not so sure if I believe that, to be honest. From everything I've learned over the years, Ted Turner had a hands-off approach when it came to WCW, and anything creative was handled by executive producers or bookers, but nonetheless, higher up in Turner had the ability to tell WCW what they wanted, and WCW would have no real option but to do what they were told. This is also made a hell of a lot easier when you have Jim Herd calling the shots in WCW. As we have discussed before, Herd wanted to introduce cartoony and ridiculous characters to WCW in a poor attempt to compete with Vince McMahon, and his ideas are still ridiculed to this very day. So if Jim Herd and Dusty Rhodes were told to come up with a Wizard of Oz character, then I can't imagine there being any real pushback. It was right up Herd's alley, really. Still, do keep in mind that it's never been confirmed if the higher-ups at Turner actually requested this character, or if Jim Herd and Dusty Rhodes just put it together because Turner owned the rights to the Wizard of Oz. But it also doesn't really matter. A character inspired by the famous book and movie would debut in WCW, and in short, it was absolutely awful. Big Kevin Nash's journey to superstardom wasn't an easy one, no matter what his detractors may say. During his initial stint in WCW, he portrayed 4 characters: Steel of the Master Blasters, Dr. X, the wisecracking Vinny Vegas, and of course he portrayed Oz in the middle of these other 3 gimmicks. Vinny Vegas wasn't too bad. I quite enjoy looking back at Vinny, and that character got him noticed by Shawn Michaels, so it wasn't a complete failure. The Master Blasters tag team was seen as a pair of Road Warrior ripoffs, and the team went through a few changes too, with Master Blaster Iron getting replaced with Master Blaster Blade. The Blasters lasted all of 5 months, and Big Kev knew it was time for a change. He was excited when Dusty Rhodes approached him in regards to a singles run. He wasn't so excited when Dusty pitched the Oz character though, with Kevin telling Dusty, "You do know that Oz isn't a person but a geographical location." Still, Kevin didn't really have a choice. He was still getting paid, and Kevin Sullivan advised him to go along with it, take the money and make the most of it. On Steve Austin's Broken Skull Sessions, Kevin said Dusty sold it like the movie Tron. You had to get through all these other guys to get to Oz, so he was gonna be an attraction, if you will. Sounds like Dusty was just saying anything to get Nash in those emerald green tights, but Nash is also thankful for Dusty, and the big man holds no ill will. If it wasn't for Oz, there'd be no Vinny Vegas, and if there was no Vinny Vegas, there'd be no Big Daddy Cool Diesel. Still, Big Kevin Nash was falling victim to some sort of Turner WCW crossover shit, and really there was no good that could come of this. Nash wasn't going to be the Tin Man, he wasn't going to be the Cowardly Lion, he wasn't even going to be the Wizard of Oz. That probably would have been even more stupid anyway, seeing as the Wizard was just a normal guy. But anyway, let's look at the character debut and we'll see how the geniuses at WCW stumbled their way through this one. Oz would debut at the first ever WCW Super Brawl event on May 19th, 1991. The event took place in St. Petersburg, Florida. Right in the middle of the card after Paulie Dangerously's Danger Zone with Stan Hansen, the camera cuts away to the entranceway where green lights begin to flash. If you thought Oz was just going to walk out here all alone with no pomp and circumstance, then you'd be absolutely wrong. Because here's fucking Dorothy, the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the Lion from the Wizard of Oz getting led up the entranceway by a wizard with a pet monkey. That wizard is Kevin Sullivan, by the way. A voiceover says, "Once upon a time in a land far away, there lived a wizard, but not the Wizard of Oz. His name was the Great Wizard, and he ruled the Kingdom of Oz." So I guess that explains it. Kevin Nash is the Great Wizard. He's like the ruler of Oz, and he's named Oz, so he's Oz of Oz. The voiceover continues, "Now our weary travellers are at the end of their journey as they face the Emerald City." Kevin Sullivan keeps saying "Welcome to Oz," and it becomes really annoying too. We see Oz of Oz standing at the gates of his castle. Oz says, "Come forward, I am Oz, the great and powerful. Who are you? The great and powerful Oz knows why you've come. How dare you come to me? I'll show you who Oz really is. I'll show the world..." What is this? I'll show the I'll show the world who Oz really is. Dorothy and her cronies run away and the little monkey wants to leave too. Little guy's on a short leash and he's freaking out seeing the pyro. And this giant fucking goon here wearing a cape, a stupid hat and a rubber mask complete with an old man's grey beard. Oz's theme music plays and you can hear Queen's Another One Bites the Dust in the bass line. I'm not kidding either, by the way. Sullivan keeps saying welcome to Oz and that little monkey's clearly terrified. Those masks the guys have on are absolutely horrific and creepy. And look at their names here. We have Oz and the Wizard. So to confirm, Kevin Sullivan is the Wizard but not the Wizard of Oz. Oz is the ruler of Oz. He has a cape and I don't know, is that a wizard's hat? I don't think it is, but Oz is also not the Wizard of Oz. He's just Oz. My head hurts. Anyway, Oz and the Wizard get in the ring. Oz removes his mask and hat and Kevin's only gone and dyed his hair grey. Imagine that. He performs a shoulder tackle on Tim Parker. We see a body slam. Oz then performs an admittedly awesome looking spinning crucifix powerbomb for the win. 26 seconds of action here, folks. The entrance was about 5 minutes longer. So Oz wins in his big debut match. There you go. That monkey, by the way, yeah, that monkey died after the entrance. Kevin Sullivan said he snapped the monkey's neck when pulling the leash after the monkey got scared during the pyro, and he fucking laughs when telling the story too. You can look up the Sullivan interview yourself on YouTube because I'm not going to link to it. The little monkey's still moving around after the entrance, by the way, but yeah, according to Sullivan, the monkey died shortly afterwards. Alright, so far we have a shit gimmick and a dead monkey. Things aren't going too fucking well, are they? Well, the fun didn't stop on television. According to Nash on the Steve Austin Broken Skull show, that cape weighed around 100 pounds and he had to carry it and the mask and the big stupid hat in a big old crate. That crate would have to get checked onto airplanes and brought to hotels and arenas. Austin said that was the biggest rib in all of this, the fucking crate. Nash would take his Emerald Tights to Clash of the Champions 15 next in Knoxville, Tennessee for a match against Johnny Rich. Yeah, Oz only wrestled the big names, as you can clearly tell. Oz has his big stupid Kessel entranceway, he has his big stupid mask and big stupid cape. The stupid little wizard's here too, but of course there's no monkey. 1.5 minutes of action this time and Oz could have ended it sooner after a big boot, but he brought the illustrious Johnny Rich back to his feet, and again we see that impressive spinning crucifix powerbomb. If there's one good thing we can take from all this, it's Oz's finisher. From here, it's straight to the Great American Bash on the 14th of July 1991, Oz versus Ron Simmons. Oz's first real test in WCW, and keep in mind too, Oz still hadn't wrestled on any weekly WCW shows. This match here at the Bash would be the one I'd recommend out of all the Oz matches, but it's really just picking the best out of a bad bunch. It's probably the most competitive of all his matches, but admittedly, it's hard to get over the way Oz looks too. Kevin Nash is one of those guys who really didn't need any kind of gimmick. Anyway, it starts off as a back and forth affair with neither man getting any kind of advantage. Oz manages to floor Simmons with a big boot, but Ron replies with a drop toe hold. The crowd pops when Oz gets sent over the top rope with a clothesline, and then the camera cuts over to the Wizard and you get completely taken out of the match. Just look at this nonsense. Look at this. Simmons overpowers Oz during a test of strength, but he hits the mat hard after a missed dropkick. Simmons finds himself on the outside where that little shitbag Wizard gets in a cheap shot, but all this still leads to Ron picking up the win after a jumping shoulder block, and with that, Oz just becomes another guy with an elaborate entrance. There's nothing special about him, he isn't invincible, he's just another wrestler with a horrible gimmick, and anyone with any relevance in WCW should have no problems taking this chump down. Even with the defeat at the Great American Bash, WCW still decided to book Oz in 3 more squash matches that would air on WCW television on Saturday night. Jumpin' Joey Maggs thought he could take on Oz on the 17th of August episode of WCW, but he got destroyed in just over 3 minutes. Oz didn't bother to bring the Wizard to this match, and he didn't bother to perform his spinning crucifix powerbomb either. It ended with a sidewalk slam. He also didn't bother to dye his hair grey. The ruler of Emerald City now had blonde hair and the mullet was gone too. The following week, Kevin Grant stepped up to the challenge, and take a look at Mr. Grant here. That's one confident individual right there. Oz performs 2 body slams. He performs a backbreaker where the illustrious Kevin Grant gets his back annihilated multiple times. We see a few strikes to the lower back, we see the sidewalk slam, and Oz wins another one. I've got a feeling we won't be seeing that crucifix powerbomb nor the wizard ever again. Next up we have Jimmy McKinnon. Again, the confidence is just dripping off this lad right here. His face seemed to really annoy Big Oz, so Nash tried to crush his skull with his bare hands. Jimmy looks like he got hit by a car when he takes a clothesline, and there's a moment in the match where he looks directly at the camera, almost as if to say, please someone, anyone watching this TV show, help me. Oz gets all pissed off with this guy for absolutely no reason, and it's hilarious. Oz ends it with another sidewalk slam, and I've changed my mind. This is actually the best Oz match. I laughed my ass off when watching this one back. In the middle of these tapings though, another match took place that's quite noteworthy. Oz teamed up with the Diamond Stud to take on the Z-Man Tom Zenk and Big Josh, better known as Matt Bourne. Scott Hall's Diamond Stud character also made its debut at Super Brawl 1, the same event where Oz debuted. And here we have Scott Hall and Kevin Nash teaming up for the very first time in what serves as an incredible contrast to what they'd bring to the table as the Outsiders in 1996. Eric Bischoff likes to say that the Outsiders were not supposed to be invaders from the World Wrestling Federation. He maintains that Hall and Nash were trying to get revenge on WCW for their poor treatment in the past. This tag team match here with Oz and the Diamond Stud is that poor treatment, so if you want to take Eric's word for it, you could say that this here is the true origin story of the New World Order. For the record, I think Nash and Hall were brought in to look like WWF invaders, and it baffles me how Eric would think others would look at it any other way, but there you go. If you want to look at it from this point of view, the true genesis of the New World Order started with Big Nash wearing a rubber mask and ruling over Emerald City. It's fucking ridiculous. Big Josh and Tom Zenk won via disqualification. The Diamond Stud whacked Josh with Josh's own axe handle. There was also an Oz vs Sting match in the middle of these tapings. Two beach blonde dudes with pink and green luminous tights. Sounds awesome, but it's nothing special. Sting, of course, got the pinfall win. Oz's journey through mediocrity took him to Clash of the Champions 16 next in Augusta, Georgia. Oz would compete in a Battle Royal, a match that should be right up Kevin's alley, but there were a few other big boys in this one, including PN News, One Man Gang, and eventual winner Elegante. Oz didn't even bother wearing his rubber mask for this one, and it's kinda funny how every time Oz made an appearance, something else would get removed from the gimmick. First it was the monkey because it died, then the wizard fucked off, the grey mullet then got changed, Oz stopped doing his finisher, and now he doesn't have the mask. He ended up in the final four of this Battle Royal with Dustin Rhodes, Elegante and One Man Gang, but Elegante eliminated both Oz and Gang at the end to win the match. Check out Oz trying to get his ass over that top rope after the clothesline. After Clash 16, Oz went on quite the losing streak on the house show loop, but he got the chance to wrestle Sting twice again, and he also got to team up with stunning Steve Austin in October. In saying that, he was also getting beat by Tom Zenk, Big Josh and Van Hammer while on tour, so yeah, things weren't looking too good. As a matter of fact, things never looked good really, did they? Oz went to New Japan for 2 dates in October too, winning 2 tag team matches while teaming up with Jushin Liger in the first and Nakira Nagami in the second. Nash was billed as the Great Oz when working in Japan, and the character was well received too. Still, as soon as he got home, the losing streak continued. Oz would compete at the 1991 Halloween Havoc show in a match against strongman Bill Kazmaier. A very strong man indeed, but a man who had the personality of a doorknob. You'll notice that Oz lost something in this match too. The emerald green tights were now gone. There's a hint of green still visible in his new black tights though, to be fair. But new tights couldn't help Oz at Halloween Havoc 91 because he took another loss after around 4 minutes of action. Big Kaz won with a torture rack and the match was brutal. Oz would make one more televised appearance. He lost to Rick Steiner on TV in about 90 seconds, and Oz wouldn't be seen on WCW television ever again. He did continue to wrestle on house shows, but things didn't get any better. A loss to Arachnaman on the 7th of December shows us how the higher-ups in WCW now felt about the Oz gimmick. It was a colossal waste of time and a colossal waste of money. It's been said that WCW jobbed out Oz because Kevin Nash refused to sign a $300 per night guarantee. WCW were losing money, but still they wanted to retain Kevin Nash. So the Oz character went on a losing streak until something else came up for Big Sexy to do. WCW. Kevin took the initiative himself and he came up with Vinny Vegas, a character inspired by actor and comedian Andrew Dice Clay, and a character that, without a doubt, suited Kevin way more. The Oz experiment had ended, thank God. Kevin continued working as Vinny Vegas. He was close to giving up wrestling altogether, but Shawn Michaels saw Vinny Vegas on TV and he thought the Vin Man would make a great bodyguard for the Heartbreak Kid over in the World Wrestling Federation. So, another WCW blunder in the books, and another tale of WCW completely messing up. Oz lives on in infamy though. It's one of those gimmicks that you can't help laughing at, and even Big Kevin Nash doesn't shy away from calling out how ridiculous it all was either. He even refers to his sick Oz hat as a dunce cap. Nash also said that Dusty's vision for Oz wasn't what we got on TV. That thing about Oz being a kind of final boss and superstars having to defeat a ton of other superstars to finally reach Oz didn't see the light of day. But even that sounds too convoluted for WCW standards during this era. If it did happen, I couldn't see it lasting more than a few weeks. It was doomed from the start though. That entrance attire completely destroyed any hope the character had, and Kevin's also the first person to admit that he was still green back then, both from an attire standpoint and from an in-ring work standpoint. Nash said he only started grasping pro wrestling when he stood outside the ring and he watched Shawn Michaels matches while acting as his bodyguard. So what we really get with Oz is a bad character portrayed by a wrestler who, at the time, wasn't overly confident in the ring. There are no good matches here. The job match with old Jimmy McKinnon gave me a good laugh, but there's nothing here that I'd recommend. Thank God Kevin would move on to bigger and better things, and thank God he didn't let this WCW run be the end of him. Thanks for watching guys, and take care. It might be hard to believe, but this invasion right here was not the worst invasion angle that WCW was involved in. I know, crazy. WCW had a weird history of cross-promotion throughout the 90s, but the one we're going to look at today was booked like a typical wrestling invasion where superstars would invade their competitors' shows and whatnot. Only one big problem though, the other company involved in this storyline wasn't a wrestling organization. In the year 2000, an invasion started where WCW went up against Battle Dome, which to my understanding was a Gladiators knockoff that lasted only 2 seasons. And trust me, by the time this video ends, you'll be thinking that WCW vs WWF was a masterpiece in comparison to this nonsense right here. This WCW vs Battle Dome thing is a total mess, and because Battle Dome taped shows well in advance, while WCW produced live TV on Monday nights, there were some serious continuity problems with both shows telling different stories. World Championship Wrestling at the best of times struggled with continuity when just booking Nitro and Thunder every week, so the mere thought of WCW trying to streamline angles taped for another show well in advance into their already messy schedule sounded like a really bad idea. Let's see how this all played out on TV and you'll see what I mean. This is WCW vs Battle Dome. So, I'm gonna come clean. I've never seen an episode of Battle Dome until a few days prior to scripting this video, and I thought I'd really need to learn more about the show before trying to speak about it. I want you guys to meet Nick, or Rebel Light as he's known on YouTube, a guy who helps me out with some wrestling bios videos and a guy who really helped in maintaining the upload schedule on the channel. In short, a dude who saved my ass multiple times. I said to Nick, hey, I really want to cover this Battle Dome thing for Blunder, but I don't know anything about it. And Nick was like, yeah, I remember that show. So I thought, why not bring Nick on to Blunder so he can explain what Battle Dome is all about. So to get you up to speed on this television television show before we look at the segments that aired on TV. Here's Rebel Light.
Hey Ryan, thanks for bringing me onto the channel today. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm really freaking hyped to be here. And everyone watching the video, I just want to say thank you ahead of time, not only for checking my section out, but also watching the video. It's genuinely crazy and blowing my mind that I'm here right now. I've been a big fan of the channel since like for a couple years now, so just having the opportunity to jump on today and talk about a topic is literally blowing my mind. But I'm done jerking the channel off for now. Let's go ahead and talk some Battle Dome. Battle Dome began airing in the US on September 18th, 1999 and would air Monday nights on UPN. A fun fact, both this and SmackDown appeared on UPN at the exact same time both shows were running. I'll do my best to streamline this here so we can get y'all back to Ryan, but there is some interesting information on the show. Unfortunately, there isn't as much on Battle Dome as you'd think that there would be. Ryan was correct to say Battle Dome was like the American Gladiators TV show. Bob Levy, who was responsible for directing the 1991 to 1993's Gladiators, also directed Battle Dome. Both shows also contain the man who was most likely created in a laboratory by Vince McMahon himself, Michael O'Hearn. More on him a bit later though. Now, aside from general aesthetics, like the look of the show and the name Gladiators being changed to Warriors, the biggest difference between the two shows was that American Gladiators challenges had a more or less gimmicky feel to them, while Battle Dome's was more full contact. I say that somewhat loosely because despite the fact the Warriors were able to really kick the crap out of some of the contestants, they were still constrained to some very weird gimmicky events. Of the 22 episodes present in season 2, a total of 104 games were played. This includes episode 21 for the Women's Championship, but does not include the final battles because those would never contain any Warriors and featured the contestants going head to head for the final prize. Speaking of the Warriors, let's run through the 13 Warriors present in season 2, and while I do, I'm gonna let you know how many games each Warrior played throughout the show. First off, the Jobbers. Taking the lowest spot, we have Commander with a godly 1 game played in season 2. Jake Fury with 2, who at the time of me recording this, I actually did think that he had the lowest because I legit forgot Commander existed. Then we have Wish.com Brock Lesnar Moose with 5. Finally, Prince and Baby Blue at 6. Next, we got our mid-card guys, starting with Mad Dog at 9, Johnny Rocco at 11, which in my opinion, out of all the Warriors on the show, this guy had the least amount of personality. Even linking up with 3 beautiful women, he's still the most boring Warrior out of the entire bunch. Next up, we have Vince McMahon's wet dream Odell at 12, and rounding out the mid-card, we have Snake at 13. We now arrive at the main eventers. The dudes who give you the most bang for your money, or the ones at the very least I hope got paid for each event they played. We start off with this dirty old asshole named DOA, and no, unfortunately he's not Chains or any of the other DOA members from WWE. But he did play a total of 16 games. Next up, we get T-Money at 19, Kuda at 21, and probably the most unlikable dude on this show, we have Bubba King at a whopping 22 different events played. Personally, I didn't really like the guy, but if you look at him as sort of a heel, which isn't exactly how they portray him on the show, like if you watch it back, he's constantly running to the crowd, high-fiving people and giving hugs, but if you were to take a step back and look at him as a heel, I'm stretching a bit, but it kind of works. Love him or hate him, Bubba King is probably the most recognizable Warrior from the show. Next to Bubba, the most obvious of the most personality-driven Warriors on the show would be T-Money, played by Terry Crews. And to me, out of all the Warriors here, he's the one with the only real personality on the show. Everyone else just kind of screams or stares off into the distance whenever they come out to the Battle Dome or competing in any of the events. Even Michael Hearn's Odell, who they paint in the very first episode as this really, really big deal Warrior as he, slowly descends from his little star, crescent looking thing. He's painted like this really big deal, but to me, he just comes off really plain vanilla and just super generic. You can tell they were banking off his look and previous experience in American Gladiators. I've seen a couple interviews with Michael Hearn, and despite the fact that he comes off as a really nice guy, when you watch this show back and see some of the promos, you can kind of see why Terry Crews is the only notable person to come out of this entire series. Quick side note, the only reason Bubba King got 22 games was because Odell was hurt in episode 1 and needed a substitute for aerial kickboxing. And let's run through the events real quick as well. And again, I'll let you know which ones were played the most and by who. Starting with the lowest, we have a tie. Battle Wall only being played 4 times in the show, and right away we have a 3-way tie between Moose, Prince, and the dirty ol' asshole himself after competing twice each. The other event tied for the lowest amount of usage would be Battle Bridge, with T-Money competing twice and taking the top spot. Next up we have Roller Cage, used 8 times, with T-Money and the dirty ol' asshole tied for first, competing twice in the event. We then move on to Battlefield, being used 13 times, and again T-Money takes the top spot, competing 5 times in the event. We then get to the staples of the show. Battle Wheel, which was used 16 times, with Kuda competing in the event 14 times. It's the one he's most known for playing in. Battle Hoop was used 17 times, which color me surprised to find out Johnny Rocco was the top dog here, competing 5 times in the event. Now, I'm not trying to be an asshole with this, but this guy left such a little impression with his personality, I forgot entirely that he competed in these events. Next up, we have Takedown, which was used 20 times, with Snake competing 9 of the times. And finally, we get to Aerial Kickboxing, that was used every single episode of Season 2, so 22 times, with Bubba King competing 21 times, only missing out during the Women's Championship episode. I'm serious, they freaking loved this challenge, and for me, I don't know, after about the 3rd or 4th time, I just kind of got tired of seeing it, and I knew it was going to come up every time. When I was like making my notes, every time freaking Aerial Kickboxing would pop up, like, oh, Aerial Kickboxing, Bubba King again. And I imagine at the time watching the actual show, it probably was way more hype, but today in 2022, it's just, it gets really old really fast. During Battle Dome Season 2, there was only ever 2 tiebreaker matches. This occurred on episode 13 and the season finale with the challenge Body Slam. Basically, they stuck 2 contestants on 2 pans and swung them at each other. I see why this wasn't used very often, because the one dude in episode 13 completely busts his chin wide open, like basically at the very beginning of the event. Then hilariously in the season finale, dude here loses his grip right at the beginning, but you know, he takes it well. When we move on to the final challenges, they all were basically the same thing, with the exception of episode 18, where they had all 3 contestants on that episode beating the shit out of each other because of the tiebreaker. Usually the final challenge consisted of the 2 contestants with the highest points beating the crap out of each other, attempting to knock the other one off the platform. While this is a really cool visual, can't we just appreciate how freaking dangerous this is? Sure, they took out wrestling / takedowns in season 2, but that doesn't stop these dudes from taking the scary bump in the very first episode of the season. And I know they have helmets and pads on, but that's not gonna help stop from breaking your freaking neck. Still, cool idea, but man, there is no way in hell this would get made today. Do you wanna know the kicker with all this? Wikipedia didn't have any of these stats laid out for me, so I legit had to go through and tally all of this myself. Thanks, Wikipedia. All joking aside, there is actually an issue on the Wikipedia page itself that I wanted to address. The page says Battle Dome Season 1 and 2 are available to watch on iTunes and Amazon, and I confirm that that's just not true. While Season 2 is absolutely viewable to buy on Prime, Season 1 isn't streaming anywhere in the US. Thankfully, it's not that important though when pertaining to this particular video. So after going through all of that, you're probably wondering the same thing I did. What the hell does any of that have to do with WCW? Honestly, not much, but there is a couple of connections here and there. If we're talking specifically just the show before we get to the WCW bit in Season 1, the contestants would all fight for the Battle Dome belt. Allegedly. Again, I don't have Season 1, so I can't confirm. And here's the thing, if you started watching Battle Dome during Season 2, you would have no idea that this was even like a concept or a thing in the show. Because aside from the WCW stuff, which Ryan's gonna get to in just a bit, they like never bring the belts up aside from maybe a handful of times throughout this entire season. Most notably, aside from just random shots on the bike, are before the final challenge in episode 11. It's just kinda there. I don't know if this was an attempt to remind viewers that, oh yeah, we have a belt for the WCW crossover or what, but yeah, it's definitely there. In episode 12, they have a zoom-in shot again right before the final challenge talking about the Battle Dome belt and how the contestants are gonna fight for it, but again, they don't get it. They don't even mention the belt again after the final challenge. They instead get a ring and a chance to win a chopper in the Battle Dome season finale, making the belt a prop / status symbol, I guess, more than anything. The icing on the cake, though, is the season finale. After a grueling match between the two competitors, contestant Philip Miller wins and gets his bike, his prize. He's ecstatic, and just watch how they give him this illustrious Battle Dome World title belt. This would make anybody cry with just the amount of love, attention, and just excitement he feels. The belt coveted by millions, the ultimate prize that Philip Miller has finally won.
And here's his beautiful Battle Dome belt. It's yours now, too. Thank you.
Yep, neither one of them give a shit. So that was Battle Dome in a nutshell, and I'm going to kick it back over to Ryan for the WCW crossover event.
So we're now caught up on Battle Dome and we understand what's going on here. You've got an idea of what the show was all about and you're probably thinking the same thing I'm thinking. WCW doing any kind of business with a show like this in the fall of 2000 was never going to get good results. It's another bad idea. Get this though, get this. I've watched every episode of Battle Dome that featured WCW guys and every WCW show that featured the Battle Dome guys, and certain things were aired in the complete wrong order. Because Battle Dome shows were taped so far in advance, it's clear that whoever was putting these shows together on both sides did not take the time to put things in chronological order, and what ended up getting shown on Battle Dome did not line up with what was being shown on Nitro. It's a complete fucking mess. So what I've done for this video is realigned every segment in order to show you how this angle was supposed to play out on TV. If you just watched Nitro back then, it wouldn't have mattered. Likewise, if you just watched Battle Dome, it wouldn't have mattered either. But if you were into both shows and you were trying to follow along week by week, you'd be so confused that you'd just give up. So, to the best of my knowledge and using common sense, here's the Battle Dome angle as it played out across two separate TV channels and two separate TV shows. Okay, so again, keep in mind, I've put everything in the order that I believe this mess was supposed to air on TV. If you're going to hunt down the Battle Dome episodes and Nitro episodes and watch them as they aired, you're going to get completely confused, so do keep that in mind if for some insane reason you want to go back and watch this stuff yourself. For example, the WCW guys show up in Season 2, Episode 3 of Battle Dome. They don't show up again until Episode 13, so that's 10 weeks in between appearances, yet over on Nitro, the Battle Dome appearances don't last longer than 4 weeks. So please just keep that in mind. WCW wrestlers showed up on the Battle Dome show and they took over the commentary desk. I believe this is the first WCW appearance because Ernest Miller introduces Team WCW for those watching at home who may not know who they are. We have Ernest Miller, Rick Steiner, Buff Bagwell, and Diamond Dallas Page. Battle Dome Warriors Kuda and Michael O'Dell have just finished up a game of Battle Wheel and they, along with the Battle Dome announcers, are shocked to see WCW invaders trying to take over their show. Ernest Miller says he'd kick Kuda's voodoo head off and Buff Bagwell says World Championship Wrestling is #1. The Battle Dome referee tells the WCW guys to shut up because there's a game that needs played in the Battle Dome arena. So the WCW guys stay and they call the action. Basically, they put themselves over, they make fun of the Battle Dome Warriors and the contestants, and the real kick in the balls here is the fact that the usual commentators still talk over the WCW guys, so you hardly hear a thing they have to say. Once the game ends, Kuda and O'Dell chase the WCW guys away. T-Money comes out and he's angry that the commentators allowed WCW to take over their headsets so easily. So T-Money has a question, an important question. What night is Nitro on? That's a tough one, isn't it? T-Money needs to know what night Monday Nitro's on because he promises to show up on the next episode to get a little payback. We go to some backstage footage where the WCW guys run to their limousine while Battle Dome Warriors and other Battle Dome staff give chase. Odell cuts a promo afterwards saying it's funny how WCW ran away as the Warriors approached them, and later on T-Money says the WCW guys are fake ass punks, and T-Money can't wait to show up on Nitro. So, on what was supposed to be the Nitro following this episode of Battle Dome, the Warriors are seen sitting front row and they heckle WCW superstars during the first part of the show. DDP then comes out to cut a promo, and when he gets finished, he notices Odell, T-Money, Kuda, Bubba King, and DOA sitting at ringside. Page says, "Oh look, it's the Battle Dome boys, where did these jocked up monkeys come from?" Dallas says, "These boys are trying to make a name for themselves by appearing on a higher rated show, but But Dallas has a surprise for the Warriors. Out comes Ernest Miller, Bagwell, and Rick Steiner. The cat says he's fixing to say something that'll make all 5 of these guys jump the guardrail, and Miller will happily slap each and every one of these wannabe chumps. Buff Bagwell calls the group the Battledome Queers, and Rick Steiner says, if these guys want some, come get some. The Warriors try to jump the guardrail, but they are held back by security. Bagwell continues to throw unsavory insults at the Battledomers as the 5 try their best to get in the ring, but they're held back. So, looks like you gotta tune in to Battledome next week to see what happens next. Only you don't, because the tapings were so out of order that you'd see absolutely nothing. But let's continue putting the pieces together and see what was supposed to come next. The WCW boys would retaliate by showing up on another episode of Battledome. Bubba King got done with a round of aerial kickboxing, and he went straight after Diamond Dallas Page, calling him old and calling him fake. I should bring this up too, the Battledome Warriors, the commentators, and practically everyone who spoke on the show would try to drill in the fact that Battledome was real. There was nothing scripted and nothing phony about Battledome, and this would get used against WCW and the WCW wrestlers involved in this storyline, because, you know, Kuda was a real voodoo practitioner. Yeah, no doubt the games that were being played were legit, but Battledome was seriously character driven, and hey, those characters were doing an angle with the fake WCW guys, so there's that too, you know. Anyway, Bubba King calls DDP the fakest and phoniest wrestler ever, and everyone knows it, seeing as Dallas is a 75-year-old man and WCW still let his old wrinkled ass wrestle. After Bubba gets done with another round of aerial kickboxing, the WCW boys show up and DDP says the master of the Diamond Cutter looks pretty good for a 75-year-old, while old Bubba King here's just a pimple on Page's ass. Rick Steiner grabs the Battledome Championship belt as DDP tells Bubba to shut his mouth, and Bubba says that's the same mouth that kisses DDP's wife and Dallas shouldn't forget it. Buff says that this Bubba dude ain't the stuff, and the WCW wrestlers then spit on the Battledome belt. The other Warriors then come out for a fight, but once again it's broken up by security. So again, there's no physicality. I just want to see some of these Warriors actually try to wrestle, that would be fun. Rick Steiner steals the Battledome Championship belt and the WCW guys leave the arena. And after the next round of aerial kickboxing, Bubba says Team WCW just ran off to cash in their social security checks and they don't belong inside the Battledome. The next bit of this storyline happens when Nitro travels to London, England, only it doesn't because, let me explain. I'm not sure how this is going to look on YouTube, but the overseas shows that WCW taped around this time period don't look too great from a quality standpoint. There's a bit of motion blur in the videos and there's a lack of definition throughout the entire episodes. Things look a little washed out in these London shows and the Australia shows for that matter. However, when we get to the Battledome versus WCW part of the show, the quality suddenly bumps up and it looks like any other episode of Nitro. So this was recorded in the States and they play it off like the Battledome guys actually travelled to the UK to get their belt back from Rick Steiner. T-Money says the Warriors travelled from America to England to quote, bust that ass, and Doug Dillinger's like, you won't be busting any asses around here, beat it losers. The WCW lads then show up and finally things get a little physical, but it's over just like that. Nobody gets the upper hand, nobody takes any notable bumps, it's a scuffle and it just cuts back to the arena once it's over. The next meeting between these two illustrious teams takes place in the Battledome. Rick Steiner would challenge T-Money to a Battledome bottle, and it's all fucked up here because when we see the WCW guys arrive in the arena, they're wearing the same clothes as the last time they were on the show, but when they get to the locker room, they're wearing totally different clothes. Buff Bagwell's psyching Rick up, telling him he shouldn't let anyone say he's fake. Rick Steiner's all real. Rick doesn't say a word, he's totally in the zone. Bubba King takes the low road by making fun of Rick Steiner's appearance, and we quickly cut over to see the WCW guys sparring, I think. King called Steiner a fake and phony little man and he's gonna get his ass handed to him later. Rick and T-Money then are gonna play Battlefield. You stick your ball in the Warrior's hole while the Warrior tries to guard his hole from invaders like Rick Steiner. Sorry. T-Money says he's ready and these WCW cats just live in a dreamland with all their fake junk. It's all about money, hoes and clothes, according to Lieutenant Terry Jeffords, and Rick Steiner's gonna go down tonight. T-Money comes out with all the Warriors and Rick comes out with his 3 WCW buddies. DDP says Rick's gonna hit T-Money so many times that Big Terry will think he's surrounded, and Terry says, yeah, we'll see about that. The battle gets underway and Rick almost instantly puts Money down, but he trips up when climbing the pyramid. Rick again puts Money on the mat when Terry misses a punch, and the referee forces a stop when Money throws punches while Rick's on his knees. Steiner then says fuck this, he drops the ball and the two start throwing punches. T-Money's cronies run in to break up the fight while the WCW guys are busy with the other Warriors, and T-Money gets in a cheap shot while Rick can't defend himself. Rick decides to take it out on the referee and the WCW guys leave the arena. So I think it's a draw, I'm not sure. We see Team WCW backstage and DDP says it was a 4 against 20 fight out there, but Rick's gonna take care of business on Nitro. T-Money should show up on Monday night because Steiner's looking for a fight and this needs to get settled inside a wrestling ring. The Battle Dome Warriors show up to Nitro once again and Doug Dillinger tries to throw him out but he has no luck. Rick Steiner comes to the ring holding the Battle Dome Championship belt he stole ages ago, and Rick says he's getting a bit sick of hearing these goofs talk about how wrestlers are fake and Battle Dome's real. Rick says he walked into the Battle Dome and he took their championship belt a few weeks back and there was nothing the Warriors could do about it. So if any one of these guys want to come and get their belt back, they should step into the ring with the dog-faced gremlin. T-Money gets inside the ropes and there's not much of a match here. They hit the mat pretty quickly and they roll around a bit before the other Warriors jump in and Rick's now outnumbered. Steiner takes a kick to the balls and the Warriors reclaim the belt. It fucking begs the question, why didn't DDP, Bagwell and Miller show up? They were absent throughout this whole thing and they let their brother get embarrassed. It didn't make any sense. The final meeting between WCW and Battle Dome then featured Rick Steiner sitting in the audience holding signs that said Fairy Dome and Battle Dome sucks while sitting in the Battle Dome arena. Rick makes fun of the Warriors and the Warriors approach Rick, and this leads to Steiner threatening to smash a few skulls with his steel chair. Throughout the entire show, Rick continued to heckle the Battle Dome boys, and towards the end of the show, Steiner walked out wearing T-Money's suit, and Rick says it's not T-Money anymore, it's all Rick's money. Cruz says this ends tonight and he challenges Rick to a game of takedown with Rick on defense. Terry needs to get past Rick and hit a light switch to win the match, but forget about the rules here. T-Money charges into Rick right at the start of the battle, and that's about as good as it gets, my friends. The WCW boys planned a sneak attack. It's a shame they didn't do this on Nitro. And WCW get the upper hand here when they attack T-Money and his cronies. You could say the same thing here really. Why didn't the other Warriors show up to help T-Money? WCW laughs at the Battle Dome boys before leaving the building. The commentators say this is far, far from over, but that's a big old lie, ladies and gentlemen, because that's the end of this invasion, this cross-promotion from hell, this WCW blunder that benefited absolutely nobody. I read somewhere that WCW refused to pay the Battle Dome Warriors airplane tickets, and that's why the rivalry ended. Not sure if that's true or not, and really, who cares? I can't think of anything good that came from this except maybe the novelty of Terry Crews appearing in a WCW ring, and I bet there's quite a lot of folks out there who don't know a thing about this and they never knew it happened, and that's because it was only those holding on to the bitter end who stayed tuned into WCW around this time period. Plus, Terry Crews wasn't really a huge recognisable name in late 2000. To be fair, the angle didn't get finished, so things could have ended up differently, but I bet there wasn't even a finish line or ending to the story written, because WCW really struggled during this time period from a creative aspect. I seriously doubt that there was anything set in stone for this to somehow pay off. So that was WCW versus Battle Dome, and this is Nick to close out the video.
Now, there never has been a concrete reason as to why this crossover took place, at least one that I can find. But we can follow a couple of breadcrumbs. Midaja, who was at the time this show was on the air, was one of Scotty Steiner's freaks. She was also married to Michael O'Hearn during this time frame. Prior to joining WCW, she worked on Battle Dome as one of the valets in season 1. Clearly, she had a very particular set of skills. Now, it was through her agent Rich Minzer that she met Terry Taylor, and the rest is WCW history at that point. In a relatively recent shoot interview, Mike O'Hearn stated that it was through Terry Taylor again that the crossover between Battle Dome and WCW happened. It's unclear who initiated the talks between both shows, however, Michael O'Hearn alludes to the fact that this initial run wasn't going to be the end of their crossover. In fact, he states him and other Battle Domers had started going to quote-unquote camp, which I would assume was the power plant at the time. Unfortunately, it was only a couple months later that Vince McMahon would purchase WCW and the Battle Dome crossover would end. It turns out the McMahons were also scouting O'Hearn back in the early 90s for a potential WWF run, but because of his contract with the American Gladiators TV show, it just never happened. And O'Hearn alludes that it was because of this first attempt and not going through with his original plans to join the WWF that he wasn't carried over when the WCW buyout happened. I'm sure there's more to it than that, but that's the reasoning that O'Hearn had alluded to. I did also read somewhere that there was a potential Scott Steiner connection, that he might have had a hand in making this whole crossover happen, but as far as I could tell, there was no evidence to suggest that. I could be completely wrong there or just missed out on something entirely, but I think what might be happening if there was no connection with Scott Steiner is people were just assuming there was a connection because of the whole Midaja connection and her being part of Scott Steiner's Freaks. But that was the Battle Dome crossover. Again, I want to say thank you to Ryan for bringing me on the channel today, but I also want to thank you guys for watching this whole video through and hopefully enjoying it. I don't think I need to say this, but like you guys, I'm always eagerly anticipating the next Reliving the War, the next Blunder, and I'm also very saddened for the fact that someday it's all going to come to an end, you know, when we get to the actual invasion storyline and everything. But I'll say this, it's been a hell of a ride so far. The only question I have left is, to what heights will Steve Blackman climb in his Reliving the War journey? Because we all know exactly what Blunder's Glacier will eventually come to. And I'm also kind of curious as when the hell he's supposed to come back. I guess I could look that up, but we'll wait and see what happens. Anyway, if you guys want to check any of my stuff out, my YouTube channel is youtube.com/c/REBLL. If you want to check me out on Twitter, it's just @LightRebel, capital L, capital R. And I should pop up pretty easily. On Twitter, I'm Rev of the Live Variety. If you want to see Ryan and I collab on something else, we actually took a look at the Buff Bagwell movie quite a few months back on my channel, and without spoiling anything, it was pretty hilarious. Again, thank you, Ryan, for bringing me on the channel today, and thank you all for watching.
David Arquette winning the World Championship was going to be the second Blunder video in this series. Here's the old original thumbnail I put together for it back in February this year. I had a few reasons for putting it off though. Firstly, it's a topic that's been covered to death and I wondered if there was anything I could really say that's not already out there. And secondly, I hadn't seen David's documentary film that covered his championship win and his efforts to return to pro wrestling. I want to make something very clear before continuing on. This Blunder, the final episode in the Blunder series, is not about David Arquette the person, it's about WCW's decision to make Arquette the world champion. I watched You Cannot Kill David Arquette very recently, and quite simply, the guy loves pro wrestling just like you and I. You find yourself cheering for Arquette when you learn about his professional and personal struggles, and you can tell his heart was and still is in the right place when it comes to pro wrestling. I highly recommend you check out the documentary, even if you're not a fan of David's, and even if some parts I feel were a little dramatized. But I'll talk about this after we look at everything that happened on WCW television. Because I watched this documentary, rewatched the WCW television stuff, and watched and read almost every interview I can find on the subject, I can hopefully give you guys a different look into Arquette winning the World Championship, which, by the way, is still a massive blunder on WCW's side that was equally as detrimental to Arquette and his career aspirations. So here it is, we end Blunder on the most requested topic. It's David Arquette winning the World Championship. Arquette's WCW relationship started with Ready to Rumble, a movie that received a largely negative reception but still a guilty pleasure for many wrestling fans. You know who you are. Ready to Rumble's all about Gordy and Shawn, two wrestling superfans who see their favourite wrestler Jimmy King get screwed out of the World Championship by Diamond Dallas Page and evil WCW promoter Titus Sinclair. This was originally supposed to be Eric Bischoff, but he got released when filming began. Gordy, played by Arquette, and Shawn then go on a mission to bring Jimmy King back to the top of WCW, and it all culminates in a triple steel cage match. There's a lot of WCW guys in the movie, and if you look closely, you'll also see John Cena in a gym scene before he turned invisible. But yeah, to promote Ready to Rumble, Arquette would appear on WCW television, and that's how this whole thing began. David grew up as a wrestling fan, and he remains a wrestling fan to this day. He was very willing to appear in this movie, and the WCW appearances that followed were like a dream come true. We would learn that David's love for pro wrestling and his decision to star in the movie and make WCW appearances would kinda hurt his chances for further roles, as many people in Hollywood thought he lost his mind for doing all this. But we also learned that things had started going downhill for David ever since he appeared in the 1996 Scream movie. Serious movie roles became out of reach for Arquette when the aloof Deputy Dewey appeared on screen apparently, but still, Arquette loved wrestling so much that Ready to Rumble and the WCW partnership was a no-brainer for him. Arquette's first WCW appearance on Thunder happened on April 12, 2000. This was the episode right after Vince Russo and Eric Bischoff reset the company. Arquette was shown sitting in the audience at the beginning of the show, all fired up, and Tony Schiavone mentioned that David was the big star of Ready to Rumble, which had already been released at the time. Diamond Dallas Page and Bam Bam Bigelow wrestled in the main event, and when Eric Bischoff and Jeff Jarrett got involved, Arquette jumped the guardrail to help Dallas. David ends up getting destroyed by Double J, and he's actually taking bumps here. DDP and Chris Kanyon had shown David some very basic fundamentals before the show, so he was able to protect himself and take bumps without injury. Kanyon ends up running down too, but Bischoff uses a chair and the babyfaces get taken out. Thunder ends with Kanyon, Dallas and Arquette laid out on the canvas. Later that week, Spring Stampede 2000 happened, and in the main event, Diamond Dallas Page faced Jeff Jarrett for the vacant WCW Championship. This was a tournament final. Kimberly Page ended up turning her back on her husband to join the New Blood, so Jarrett left Spring Stampede as the new World Heavyweight Champion, and Dallas left without the belt or his wife. On WCW Nitro on the 24th of April, DDP confronted Kimberly and Bischoff in the ring, but once again he was attacked by Jeff Jarrett. Arquette jumped in the ring again, and he got in some interesting offense against Bischoff. When Jarrett pulled him away, Chris Kanyon again ran in for the save, and Bischoff wasn't happy. Eric wanted to know if Arquette wanted a fight, and David agreed, saying he'll wrestle Eric Bischoff if DDP was given a title shot against Jarrett inside a steel cage later on Nitro. Bischoff agreed, so David Arquette just got booked in a match. Arquette was very excited during his promo, and you can instantly see why some fans wouldn't like him. But if he could go in the ring, this wouldn't be a problem, right? DDP and Kanyon got David all fired up backstage before the match. Bischoff comes out with Kimberly and Jarrett, while Arquette comes out with Page and a whole lot of pyro. And as soon as the bell rings, Jarrett grabs Arquette from the outside, and this allows Bischoff to take advantage. Eric lays in some of those karate kicks, and David gets choked on the mat. David gets up and he spears Eric before pulling this face right here. That's wild. And then David rips off WWF Scotty 2 Hotty by doing the worm, adding his own little twist, but it's still Scotty's move. Gimmick infringement, brother. Arquette covers Bischoff, but Jarrett pulls the referee out. DDP then accidentally wipes the referee out, and Double J then hits Page with his world title. Back inside the ring, Bischoff hits Arquette with a low blow. Jarrett then plans on hitting David with his guitar, but Arquette moves out of the way and Bischoff takes the hit. Kanyon then takes care of Jarrett as referee Mickey J runs in to count the pinfall. Arquette beats Bischoff on Monday Nitro. This is inoffensive really. It's Eric Bischoff versus David Arquette, not Sting versus David Arquette. Absolutely no issues with this, and we have seen way worse stuff on WCW television. Later that night, DDP defeated Jarrett for the world title, so Arquette was really instrumental in bringing the gold back to Dallas Page. The 26th of April episode of Thunder later in the week took place in Syracuse, New York, and the show opened up with Bischoff, Kimberly and Jarrett pulling Arquette out of their car. Arquette gets brought to the ring where he's used as a bargaining chip. Double J wants a tag team match, he and Bischoff versus DDP and Arquette. DDP's world title must be on the line, and whoever scores the pinfall wins the championship. DDP rushes down alongside Chris Kanyon, and Dallas doesn't accept. So the franchise and Buff Daddy appear, and Double J says Dallas really doesn't have a choice. If he says no, then Buff and Douglas are going to run down and attack Page and Canyon. Ric Flair and Lex Luger show up to even the odds while DDP and Canyon storm the ring. Jarrett manages to get out of harm's way while still holding on to Arquette, so the offer's still on the table if DDP wants Arquette brought to safety. Bischoff, Kimberly and Jarrett give David a hard time and Dallas ends up agreeing to the match. Arquette refuses medical attention, he's adamant about wrestling this match, but Page tells him minutes before the main event that he's not going to wrestle tonight. Dallas will take on Double J and Eric Bischoff all on his own. We come back from a commercial break, Dallas makes his way down to the ring, but Arquette shows up and it looks like David isn't going to listen to Page's demands. He also pulls off some gang signs and then he shits himself when Dallas's pyro goes off. Fantastic. It's then revealed that Kimberly Page is going to referee this match, so the odds are stacked against the babyfaces big time. Arquette and Bischoff fall out of the ring and they fight all the way to the back. The focus of the match then goes to the ring where Kimberly Page won't count Jarrett's shoulders to the mat, and moments later Bischoff returns with no David Arquette. He's been taken out apparently. Page has to dig down to try to overcome his opponents, but he gets a hand when David comes limping back to the ring. DDP gets a chance to kiss his future ex-wife, so naturally he takes it, and Arquette spears Bischoff while DDP's in a lip lock. While Arquette pins Bischoff, Jarrett hits DDP with a guitar. Jarrett then pins Dallas, but referee Mickey J runs down again and he decides to count Bischoff's shoulders to the mat, and that's how David Arquette won the World Championship. David can't believe it, Page can't believe it, Tony Schiavone goes into a state of shock on commentary, and the wrestling world collectively groaned as Arquette lifts the championship in the air. A triple cage main event was also booked for Slamboree featuring Jarrett and DDP for the world title, so no one knew if that match was not going to happen, but that was really the last thing on anyone's mind. Arquette won the world championship, and many, still to this day, see this as one of WCW's darkest moments. Eric Bischoff said Arquette winning the championship was a Vince Russo idea and Russo's backed this up, there's no question about it. Bischoff went along with it though without protest. David had no idea he was going to win the championship and it was DDP who broke the news. Arquette thought DDP was joking, he didn't believe it, but Page said he wasn't messing around and Arquette immediately went looking for Russo for confirmation. When Russo said David was winning the gold and David would need to hang around for another few weeks for the Slamboree show, Arquette said to him he didn't think it was a good idea. But after a little convincing, David admitted to feeling excited about winning the gold. Eric Bischoff said on his 83 Weeks podcast that this was a stunt and nothing more, a business decision to promote a movie, and that's it. He understands the hate it continues to get from fans, but Eric really sees it as nothing more than a promotional vehicle, while saying it's not like Arquette defeated Hulk Hogan or Ric Flair. Speaking of Ric Flair, it was reported that Flair told David he needs to show up at the hotel bar later that night with the championship and he has to buy the boys drinks. It would maybe be a way to smooth things over in a way that David could show respect for WCW and the championship he just won. Arquette said he went to the hotel that night, he was walking around talking to the wrestlers and talking about winning the championship, and a lot of guys gave him the cold shoulder. He mentioned Rick and Scott Steiner not being very receptive, but no other names are brought up. And he also said that it was when these wrestlers gave him the cold shoulder that he realized what the championship meant to these guys. Vince Russo, meanwhile, was delighted with how things turned out. Arquette was featured in USA Today following Thunder, and that's what Russo wanted, WCW coverage in mainstream media. Russo said when he signed with the company, he was signed to a television deal, not a wrestler deal, not a booker deal, a television deal. His job was to get ratings up and get more eyeballs on WCW, and he was convinced that this coverage was nothing but a good thing. But Russo actually ended up alienating those fans who remained loyal to the company, the fans who stuck with WCW throughout all the hardships, the fans who were irreplaceable. WWF diehards, meanwhile, would laugh that the competition just crowned David Arquette as their new champion. So all in all, Bischoff and Russo may have seen it as nothing more than a publicity stunt that got some headlines, but for anyone who truly cared about WCW and its history, it was just too much. You can also say it's just a belt, it's a prop, and it really doesn't matter, and that's fine too, but the vast majority think otherwise when it comes to David Arquette. A few things before continuing on. I hear all the time that Arquette didn't want to do it, and I always wondered why he just didn't flat out refuse. I mean, they can't force him to do it, right? Well, when you watch the documentary and learn more about David as a person, you can see he's maybe a little sensitive and a guy who maybe tries too much to please others. I think he may have been easily swayed into this. Next, the business with David's pay. What isn't mentioned in the documentary, yet it's confirmed by DDP and the WWE Legends of Wrestling Roundtable show, and also confirmed by Ric Flair in his book, David Arquette donated every cent he earned from WCW to the families of Owen Hart, Brian Pillman, Darren Drozdov, and Bobby Duncombe Jr. I find that way more respectful to the business than walking around a hotel bar and buying people drinks. Dallas also brought up a question to fans. If you were asked to do this, if you were told you're going to be WCW champion for a few weeks, would you say no? It's something to think about. The next episode of Nitro started off with Arquette, Page and Kanyon meeting the New Blood in the parking lot, but their meeting was rudely interrupted by Hulk Hogan's awful driving. Later on, we see footage of David on the set of 3,000 Miles to Graceland. His wife at the time, Courtney Cox, thinks David's lost his mind and she's telling him this new venture is very dangerous. Kurt Russell, meanwhile, laughs at Arquette when Courtney tells him he's the current WCW champion. Arquette chases Russell and Courtney screams that David's not a wrestler. Arquette goes to the ring and he announces that he's relinquishing the WCW Championship. He's an entertainer, not a sports entertainer. He appreciates how fans have cheered for him over these past few weeks, but someone more deserving should hold the championship. So he wants to vacate the belt and put it up for grabs later in the week at Slamboree. Page versus Jarrett inside the Ready to Rumble triple cage. Whoever wins will leave with the gold. Jarrett and company come down to the ring and Jarrett says David isn't the commissioner. David decided to cross a line and become a wrestler, so that's exactly how he's going to get treated. Russo and Bischoff aren't going to allow David to forfeit the championship. Instead, that triple cage match is going to be a triple threat and David's going to compete along with Jarrett and Page. Bischoff thinks Arquette could do with a warm-up though, so he books a match, Arquette versus Tank Abbott. Abbott comes down to the ring and Page says that match ain't gonna happen. We get a big old brawl and the babyfaces have to leave the ring, and Abbott says if Page can beat him tonight then the Arquette match is off. But if Tank wins then Arquette's pretty much done for. Kanyon and Arquette get locked in a room while the match takes place. Jeff Jarrett breaks a bottle over Page's head and Dallas gets knocked out. So Tank Abbott wins and Tank Abbott faces Arquette later on Nitro. David's in an absolute panic backstage before the match, but he has no choice. Abbott laughs as Arquette tries to choke him out. He intimidates David in the corner before slamming him to the mat. Arquette then tries his deadly spear, but it's like a child running to their parents for a hug. And then an ambulance pulls up to the arena. DDP gets out and he comes to rescue Arquette. The cameras miss the diamond cutter, but we see it in the replay. DDP puts Arquette's arm over Abbott, and David Arquette wins another match on WCW television. Not a lot happened on Thunder that week except David falling through the gimmicked entranceway before the end of the show. Yeah, you don't hear much about this one for some reason, but it happened. The triple cage match happens then on pay-per-view, and you'd think this would be an easy win for Dallas Page. After all, Dallas has got backup in the form of David Arquette, so what could possibly go wrong? Swerve, bro. You kinda expected it really, but it's a swerve. Arquette turns his back on Dallas and he helps Jarrett become the new heavyweight champion. Quite a lot of title changes over these past few weeks, right? Almost like the legacy of the championship had already been truly diminished before Arquette got his hands on it, but I digress. To be fair, Arquette mostly stayed out of the ring in this one, only doing the odd spot here and there while letting the professionals handle most of the heavy work. We also got to see Kanyon getting thrown off the cage at the end of the match, so there's that too, I guess. The next night on Monday Nitro, it was revealed that David was now part of the New Blood, but this would also be David's final appearance in WCW. Bischoff says this was a plan all along and Arquette wasn't just swayed before going out for the triple cage match. The title win, the Tank Abbott stuff, all of it was done so Eric could screw around with Dallas Page. And Bischoff said he even fooled all those smart internet wrestling fans who were so upset about Arquette winning the gold. David delivers his promo here in that same ever so slightly annoying manner that we witnessed during his first WCW promo, only it's been ramped up a lot. He says Page should never have trusted someone from Hollywood. On the set of Ready to Rumble, Arquette told Dallas he wants to become a professional wrestler, and Page told David he'd get hurt. And David says here, it turns out that Dallas was the one who got hurt. Arquette rubs it in that he was the World Heavyweight Champion, and he has Eric Bischoff to thank for it. DDP then shows up. The New Blood get out of the ring after a brawl, but they leave Arquette behind. David then takes a diamond cutter here, and give him credit, he took the cutter well. And that's it. That's how David spent his time in World Championship Wrestling. The whole thing became the stuff of WCW legend in the worst way possible. Fans absolutely hated it, and the hate didn't go away. Years and years after WCW's closure, it still gets brought up as one of the worst things WCW ever did, and it became one of the top examples of why the company went down the toilet. I thought the same as everyone else. You kinda look at this thing and just shake your head, really. Being a WCW fan and seeing it all unfold felt like another nail in the coffin, and it's always been a moment in WCW history that you point at and say, well, Vince Russo explained this. Then I watched You Cannot Kill David Arquette, and like everyone else, I learned more about David's thoughts on all this, and I kinda felt bad for the guy. There's going to be some mild spoilers about the documentary in this last bit, so if you plan on watching it soon, I'd recommend stopping this video now, but I won't give too much away. What you'll learn about David in this documentary early on is that he deals with a lot of anxiety. I'm not sure if his downfall in popularity attributes to this or if it's more to do with his life choices, but David deals with his own internal struggles. Winning that championship really bothers him 20 years after it happened. That decision made by WCW is something that hasn't left him, and in a way, it defined him in the worst way possible. His involvement in wrestling really hurt his acting career, and on top of that, his involvement in wrestling was really negatively received. So Arquette completely lost with this one. A headline in USA Today doesn't buy what this dude went through, trust me. David feels like he needs to redeem himself by learning what it actually takes to become a professional wrestler. He wants to give back to the wrestling business, he wants to respect it, and he wants to have decent matches where fans would maybe say, you know what, David Arquette really isn't all that bad. And we get to see how David trains for this while completely going against doctors' orders and family requests. It's a really personal thing that David wants to put to rest and find peace with. It's truly remarkable how the WCW Championship win affected him for so long, and because he's such a ball of anxiety, we can see how he struggles with pro wrestling even though he has an undeniable love for it. And seeing him try to get back into things and realizing that some folks still don't like him and some fans still laugh at him can actually be quite emotional at times. What struck me most about the documentary was how much respect he has, or respect he learned to have, for pro wrestling. There's one moment where luchador Mr. Maldito gives him a signed mask and he begins to cry. He talks about his love for Miss Elizabeth and how he was infatuated with her growing up. We learn about him wrestling with his family as a kid and going to shows. But all this is bundled up with superstars talking about how great David is as a person, but his championship win is something that's maybe unforgivable. David goes through a lot to try to get that redemption, culminating in a horrific match with Nick Gage that I'm sure you heard about, and finally a bout with Ken Anderson. And you're left hoping that David got rid of those things that were once bothering him when the journey's all over, but you're also unsure if he's truly content. It's a fascinating documentary for sure, and I'm also confident it'll sway many fans into liking a guy who they maybe once thought was a bit of a goofball. Some may say it as a vanity project, but I still think it's very much worth your time. There's also the question about why the documentary was made, you know? Did he make the documentary because he was getting back into pro wrestling, or did he get back into pro wrestling because he needed to make a documentary? There are parts in it that come across as set up because the cameras were rolling, and I'm pretty sure that Nick Gage match too was always supposed to be super violent for the documentary, but a legit accident did end up happening. So you will have some of these thoughts in your mind while watching. It certainly helped me change the way I think about David though. I always knew about him donating his paycheck, and I heard the stories about him not wanting to win the championship too, but the documentary gives us real insight into David as a person, and even after how badly pro wrestling treated him, from the guys in the business to the fans watching at home, it's incredible how much he still loves the business. So this whole thing, in my opinion, wasn't a David Arquette blunder, it was a WCW blunder. That's it guys, WCW Blunder has wrapped up and the series is over. If you're wondering if a series 2 may be coming out, I honestly don't know. I know there's more stuff out there you'd like to see covered, such as Mike Awesome, the NWO breaking apart, Russo's title win, Goldberg's heel run, the Dungeon of Doom and all that stuff, but I'm taking a break from Blunder for now to focus on a few other things. If there is a season 2, I'd want to plan it out ahead of time and lay out the roadmap a little better with uploads scheduled on certain days, just so you guys know exactly when they're coming out. But again, I'm not sure if there'll be a second series right now. It is possible though. There's also the possibility of a WWF or WWE version of the series that I spoke about before, but again, there's no real plans. I just want to be honest with you guys. But thank you very much for watching, and I hope you guys enjoyed watching the 10 blunders we witnessed in World Championship Wrestling. Take care everyone.